Chapter 586. A Manjikyu Sharingan and a Rinnegan. This is the strongest fighting posture Rog has set for himself at this time. Although the two Rinnegan are more symmetrical and more powerful. But considering the special situation of Thanos and the power gem in his hand, Rog still kept a Manjikyu Sharingan for himself as a backup. Using the reality gem to enhance his chakra and evolve a temporary Rinnegan for himself, Rog broke the pentagonal crystal in Kyuubi's helmet and flew out of it. Then he removed the Susanoo armor on Kyuubi and let Kyuubi return to his original appearance. Kyuubi's task has been completed, and he intends to fight the next battle himself. When removing the Susanoo armor on Kyuubi, Rog also removed the forced taming of Kyuubi by the Sharingan and returned freedom to Kyuubi. At this time, although Kyuubi only has the instinctive consciousness of a beast, he knows very well that Rog is not someone he can offend now. Almost at the moment when the suppression of the Sharingan disappeared, Kyuubi did not hesitate. He did not look at Rog floating above his head and turned to run. Rog did not stop Kyuubi's escape and let him leave the battlefield that did not belong to him. If it was on Earth, he would not dare to let Kyuubi leave like this. Although Kyuubi is a tailed beast made by the reality gem, his combat power is not worse than the real Kyuubi. If it is judged according to the standards of the Earth, Kyuubi is now a fox-shaped self-propelled large-yield renewable supernuclear bomb. If he is allowed to leave, who knows what kind of disaster he will cause on Earth. But this is not the Earth, and there are only 4 living people here. That's right, there were 4 of them, not 3. Gamora, Thanos' adopted daughter, is still on Titan Star, but Thanos does not know this. After letting Kyuubi pursue his temporary freedom, Rog quickly confirmed the location of Thanos with chakra perception. After disappearing from Kyuubi's eyes, Thanos did not leave the battlefield too far. In other words, he had no intention of leaving the battlefield. In a ruin that had completely lost its original appearance, Roger saw Thanos with an indifferent expression, sitting leisurely on a broken stone pillar that had fallen to the ground. Although he was just casually sitting on the stone pillar, Thanos' overlord still gave people a very oppressive feeling at this time. That feeling was like an ever-victorious general waiting for his next opponent to take the initiative to come to him. Thanos' current momentum was very good and intimidating, but Rog saw through his disguise at a glance. Compared with the last time he sensed it, Thanos' overlord's life energy strength had dropped a little. The power gem was indeed a universe-level treasure, and it could bestow unimaginable power to the user. But at the same time, the conditions for using the power gem were also extremely strict. If he was slightly weaker, he wouldn't even be able to touch the power gem, let alone use it. Although Thanos met the minimum requirements to use the power gem, this does not mean that he can use the power gem for a long time. Although Susanoo did not bring any obvious injuries to Thanos, it successfully consumed a part of his stamina and life energy. So don't look at Thanos' overlord sitting on the stone pillar. His real purpose was actually to let himself take a breath to recover his consumed stamina. After flying to a distance of only a few dozen meters away from Thanos' overlord, Rog stretched out his left hand and aimed his palm at Thanos' overlord sitting on the stone pillar. Benshoden. Since he got himself a Rinnegan, he will not forget to add a few additional Rinnegan-exclusive ninjutsu for himself. In just a moment, a powerful suction force enveloped Thanos' overlord, making him fly to Rog's palm like a cannonball. However, in the next second after Bansho 10 took effect, a strong purple light emerged from Thanos' overlord's body. At the same time, a lightning-like energy beam gushed out of his body and rushed toward Rog. Under the effect of Bansho 10, this purple lightning-like energy beam showed a faster speed than before and came in front of Rog in an instant. Just when this purple lightning-like energy beam was about to hit him, Rog used another signature ninjutsu of Rinnegan. Shinra Tensei. In the systems exchange page, the introduction of Shinra Tensei was that, with himself as the center, all objects and ninjutsu around him will be bounced off and cause damage. But in real use, Shinra Tensei can bounce off not only objects and ninjutsu. Whether it is a substance with a physical body or pure energy, Shinra Tensei can bounce it off. The only difference is how much chakra is consumed. For Rog, who just opened the infinite mana hack, the last thing he needs to worry about now is the consumption of chakra. Now, he has 3 Hashirama's chakra. If in such a situation he still can't deal with Thanos Overlord who only has 1 Infinity Stone, then he doesn't need to get any justice from Thanos Overlord. He will find a corner to end himself, so as not to continue to lose face for the ninja profession. The purple lightning-like energy beam was bounced back by Shinra Tensei without any suspense and returned to the front of Thanos Overlord at a faster speed. Boom! Without any hesitation, Thanos Overlord once again released an energy beam, blocking the attack that should have hit Rog. The impact of the explosion let Thanos Overlord get rid of the control of Bansho Ten and fell to the ground. But Rog's attack was far from over. Almost at the moment when he landed, Rog's right palm shot out a black ball with a diameter of only a few centimeters. This seemingly inconspicuous black ball flew in front of Thanos Overlord at a speed faster than the speed of sound. Although the flying speed of the black ball was very fast, Thanos Overlord's speed was not slow at all. Just when Thanos Overlord planned to move sideways to avoid this inconspicuous black ball, Rog, who was floating in the air, suddenly put his hands together. Chibaku Tensei. This small black ball that he shot at Thanos Overlord was not a chakra ball, but the most important gravitational core of Chibaku Tensei. A powerful gravitational force more terrifying than Bansho Ten emerged in an instant, forcibly pulling Thanos Overlord who was trying to leave. Thanos Overlord was not the only one who was attracted by this terrifying gravitational force. Including the ground where he stood, everything around him was forcibly pulled over as if it was attracted by a black hole. Under the attraction of Chibaku Tensei's gravitational core, Thanos Overlord didn't even have the chance to drive the power gem. He was forcibly pulled into the gravitational core and was surrounded by the dirt and stones that were constantly flying around. Chapter 587. In just a second or two, a ball with a diameter of 100 meters made of rocks and soil floated in the air. Below this planet-like ball, there was a huge round pit with a diameter of hundreds of meters. Chibaku Tensei is a ninjutsu that has reached the extreme control of gravity and has a powerful sealing ability. In Naruto's world, Rakudo Sunin used Chibaku Tensei to seal Jubi's body, Geto Mazo, and created the moon in Naruto's world. At this time, although Rog couldn't create the moon like Rakudo Sunin, it wasn't difficult to use it to seal and restrict Thanos with the power gem. After using Chibaku Tensei to temporarily seal Thanos, Rog didn't stop there and continued to madly mobilize the Senjutsu chakra in his body. With the power gem in hand, Thanos would be able to escape from Chibaku Tensei sooner or later. The only problem was how much time it would take. Taking advantage of the precious time when Thanos was trapped by Chibaku Tensei, Rog used the Senjutsu Mokuton, True Thousand Hands, Buddha on top that he wanted to use for a long time, but he never had the conditions to use it. Rog, who was floating in the air, suddenly put his hands together, and a wooden man sitting cross-legged with a wooden dragon wrapped around his body emerged from the broken ground. When the head of the wooden man just reached his feet, Rog ended the floating and stood directly on the head of the wooden man, further increasing the output of Senjutsu chakra. Senjutsu Hyugen, True Thousand Hands, Buddha on top. This slightly long name has already reflected the characteristics of this strongest ninjutsu of wood release. To successfully use this ninjutsu, the first thing to do is to summon the huge Buddha with 1,000 hands, which is to complete the True Thousand Hands part of the ninjutsu. After summoning this huge Buddha with 1,000 hands, the final Buddha on top can be used, that is, to control these 1,000 wooden giant hands to smash the enemy. The power of this ninjutsu is beyond doubt, and the degree of coolness and grandeur is also directly maximized. However, this ninjutsu has a small problem. That is, the swing time is too long. The battle is not a turn-based game, and there is no uninterrupted preparation time. If you want to use these moves with too long a swing time, the key is to restrict the enemy in advance. Because of this, Rog will use Chibaku Tensei on Thanos, using the seal and restriction of Chibaku Tensei to buy himself enough time. As soon as the wooden golem under Rog's feet appeared, cracks of different sizes appeared on the surface of the rock ball floating in the air. The purple light of the power gem shone through the cracks. There is not much time left for him. Rog hastened his summoning of the Buddha statue when he saw the scene. Senjutsu chakra, chakra, chakra tensei, chakra, 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 tenchakra, chakra tensei. In addition to the enormous body of the Buddha statue, wooden arms that were neatly arranged rose from the ground behind the wooden golem. These huge wooden arms were like the spikes of a hedgehog. They were densely stacked together, forming a unique and unconventional lotus platform behind the Buddha statue. Boom! When the giant Buddha with 1,000 giant arms behind it completely revealed its true appearance, the rock ball formed by Chibaku Tensei shattered under the purple light and turned into pieces of gravel of different sizes. Relying on the power of the power gem, Thanos successfully got rid of the seal of Chibaku Tensei. However, at the moment when he got rid of the seal of Chibaku Tensei, he saw the huge Buddha statue in front of him, like a real mountain. What is shock? Big as shock. As long as an object is big enough, no matter how ordinary the object is, it will give people a shocking feeling. Especially after comparing it with their own size, this kind of biological instinctive shock will become even stronger. In front of this huge Buddha statue, Thanos, who was more than 2 meters tall, was as small as an ant. Senjutsu Moken. True thousand hands, Buddha on top. Rog didn't pay attention to Thanos' shock. At the moment when Thanos landed, he said word by word with an unprecedented serious tone. In the past, he always felt that shouting the name of a move in a battle was a very Chunibu thing. But when he summoned this huge Buddha statue with 1,000 hands and stood on the head of the Buddha statue looking down at Thanos on the ground, he instinctively shouted it. Under the gaze of Thanos, the giant wooden arms behind the Buddha statue came alive in an instant, like meteorites falling from the sky, attacking him fiercely. Is this a ninja from Earth? Looking at these huge fists that occupied his entire line of sight, Thanos silently sighed in his heart. Although he didn't know why a monster like Rog appeared on Earth, Thanos still didn't have the idea of waiting for death at this time. I'm Tianming, I won't lose to anyone. Especially people from the backward planet Earth. When these meteorite-like huge fists came towards him, Thanos, who never admitted defeat, made the craziest move so far. Whether it was using the power gem with the help of the Infinity Gloves or introducing the energy of the power gem into his body, Thanos always controlled the energy output of the power gem and controlled the energy at the stage he could bear. However, now he no longer considered his own safety and fully activated the power gem. The fists on top of the Buddha statue fell on his body one by one. Then, one by one, they shattered and broke. The huge impact brought by the Buddha statue's fist disappeared the moment it hit Thanos' body. Immovable like a mountain. At this time, Thanos seemed to have completely activated his absolute defense, and he was motionless under the bombardment of these giant fists. When the first fist of the Buddha statue hit Thanos, Rog felt that something was wrong. He felt that what he was attacking now was not Thanos, but a living power gem. Is this fused into one? Although there was now a liquid form reality gem in his body, he still showed an incredible look. He integrated the reality gem into his body just to better use the power of the reality gem and improve the compatibility between himself and the reality gem. But what Thanos did at this time was completely different from him. The power gem was still quietly staying on the Infinity Gloves, but in Roger's perception, the life energy signal of Thanos Overlord and the energy signal of the power gem had completely merged into one, becoming an inseparable whole. Chapter 588. How did he do it? Rog is also a person who knows more about Infinity Stones, but he still doesn't understand how Thanos did it. This is no longer a matter of using the power of Infinity Stones. Thanos' situation reminded him of the so-called perfect Jinchuriki. It's a bit difficult to deal with. Before the battle, Rog anticipated many situations, but he did not expect that Thanos would be integrated with the Power Stone. Thanos' move not only completely disrupted his plan, but also resolved most of the power of above-the-top Buddha. Although there are many fists that can be controlled by above-the-top Buddha, the power of each fist is similar, and there is no particularly obvious difference. If the fist in front can't cause enough damage to Thanos, then the fists in the back can't cause fatal damage to him. Is this all the big move that I've worked so hard to prepare? No, Rog will never let his efforts be wasted like this. After confirming that above the top Buddha's giant fist could not cause damage to the current Thanos, he decisively stopped the attack. In the past few seconds, above the top Buddha had thrown hundreds of punches, using about 1/10 of his arm. When the arm behind the Buddha statue reformed into the shape of a lotus throne, it could be clearly seen that the front layer had a fracture, making the originally majestic and shocking Buddha statue show some sense of fragmentation. Although Rog stopped attacking, he did not end above the top Buddha's form and still maintained a posture that could launch an attack at any time. At this time, he was like a loaded pistol, waiting for the right time to shoot. Thanos, who had neither injuries nor purple light on his body, looked up at Rog. After that, he did not do anything and just stood there silently. What does he want to do? Looking down at this somewhat abnormal Thanos, Rog frowned. According to common sense, Thanos should seize the opportunity to attack him now. But obviously, Thanos did not show any signs of launching an attack. Is it a big move? Not likely. Did he lose control? Not likely. Time passed little by little, and a strange silence appeared on the battlefield that had just been in full swing. Thanos did not attack Rog, and Rog did not want to waste his Buddha transformation. Just a moment ago, they were still fighting ferociously, but at this moment, it was as if someone had suddenly pressed the stop button. They tacitly maintained this silent scene that should not have appeared. Just as Rog was considering whether to continue to use Buddha on the top to test Thanos, on a small hill far away from the battlefield, a strong divine power of death suddenly erupted. Only after this undisguised divine power of death appeared did Rog remember the 10-minute promise he had with Gila. Damn it, how could I forget about this? As the only spectator at the scene, Gila witnessed the entire battle between Rog and Thanos. Although there were some boring energy exchanges and inexplicable pauses in the middle, overall, the battle between Rog and Thanos still gave her a lot of gains. In particular, Rog's immortal technique would release True Thousand Hands, Buddha on the top, directly refreshed her evaluation of Rog in her heart. She knew that Rog was not weak, but she did not expect that Rog had such a powerful move hidden. More importantly, this reminded her of the scene when Rog used Tsukuyomi to deal with her. It was a mental attack that lasted for half a year. Rog hung her on that damn cross for half a year. It wasn't that Gila couldn't accept the fact that she had lost to Rog. She just felt that Rog didn't seem to have used all his strength back then. Compared to Tsukuyomi's mental attack, Buddha on the top was clearly more like Rog's trump card. However, Gila would never have thought that it wasn't that Rog didn't want to use Buddha on the top, but that he couldn't use it at all. Even now, if he hadn't used the reality gem, he wouldn't have been able to use it. Gila didn't know this. Therefore, her understanding became that in Rog's evaluation standards, Thanos was an existence stronger than her. For a queen, especially a queen who was full of confidence in her own strength, one of the things Gila hated the most was being thought that she was inferior to others. Although Rog didn't say anything and he didn't have such thoughts at all, he couldn't stop Gila from thinking so. Therefore, when the agreed 10 minutes were over, Gila immediately unleashed a terrifying divine power of death, announcing her existence to Rog and Thanos. After Gila released her divine power of death in such a provocative way, Rog knew that his time alone with Thanos was over. Not only that, but Gila's actions also made him instinctively sense a trace of threat. This feeling was as if he had suddenly been targeted by a powerful and deadly beast. Before he could think further, Gila, who was at the edge of the battlefield, disappeared. In just an instant, Gila crossed a distance of thousands of meters and flashed near Thanos. Until now, Thanos was still as motionless as a mountain, as if he didn't notice Gila's arrival at all. Without any hesitation, Gila summoned her most commonly used black longsword and stabbed at Thanos' heart like lightning. Just as the black longsword in Gila's hand condensed from the divine power of death was about to pierce his heart, Thanos finally moved. However, he moved a little too late. Gila's lightning-fast sword still stabbed Thanos. However, it wasn't his heart that was pierced, but his left shoulder. Because of time, Thanos didn't completely avoid Gila's sword and only slightly reduced the power of the sword, making the injured part from the heart to the shoulder. Although it didn't pierce Thanos' heart as expected, after hitting Thanos, Gila didn't have any thoughts of fighting and decisively retreated. In order to retreat faster, Gila didn't even pull out the black longsword on Thanos' left shoulder, but directly released the right hand that was holding the sword. Thanos was injured. Gila's rapid surprise attack was successful. This didn't seem to be a problem, but whether it was Rog or Gila, they both showed a dignified look at this time. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Rog and Gila were no strangers to Thanos' amazing defensive ability. That was the absolute defense that even Might Suit, Susanoo and Buddha on the top could not break. However, now this absolute defense on Thanos' body disappeared. Whether it was their own rich combat experience or the body's combat instinct, they were all reminding them that the current Thanos was very problematic. Chapter 589. Although he didn't know why Thanos lost its absolute defense, this seemed to be a good thing for Rog, who had been in a loaded state. After Gila chose to retreat without hesitation, Rog decisively activated Buddha on the top, which was in a resting state. Yula 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 Yula. The giant fists of the Buddha statue were like a meteor shower as they smashed into Thanos. Boom 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 boom. Terrifying nuclear explosions rang out one after another, and mushroom clouds rose into the air like balls of light. In an instant, the Buddha statue threw out hundreds of punches, causing the already ravaged earth to become even more fragmented. The earth shook violently, and a hurricane-like shockwave swept through everything in the surroundings, regardless of friend or foe. Gravel and soil fell from the sky like raindrops. According to the agreement, he should have given the task of attacking Thanos to Gila. However, after discovering that the state of Thanos was somewhat wrong, he decided to temporarily put aside the agreement between himself and Gila. Thanos must die. Moreover, he had to die in his hands. Although killing Thanos with his own hands was not a mandatory task required by the system, as a transmigrator, Rog could not give this opportunity to others. This was an achievement that every transmigrator who had transmigrated to this world yearned to achieve. Rog was no exception. The giant fist of the Buddha statue was like a bullet fired from a Gatling gun, constantly smashing on Thanos' body. The light blue mixed with a hint of purple explosive light shrouded the entire sky, becoming the only light at this time. After activating Buddha on the top and throwing hundreds of punches, Roger stopped this extremely violent and terrifying physical attack and resensed the life signal of Thanos. Just like before, there was still only one signal he could perceive. The life energy signal of Thanos was still integrated with the energy signal of the power gem. Although the number of energy signals did not change, the intensity of the energy was obviously different. If the energy intensity that Rog perceived from Thanos before was like the sun, then the energy intensity that he now perceived was like the moon. The two were not on the same order of magnitude. What's wrong with this guy? If it wasn't for the fact that Thanos Overlord never left his sight, Rog would have suspected that Thanos Overlord had changed from a king player to a bronze player. When the dust from the explosion gradually dissipated, Thanos' figure reappeared in his and Gila's line of sight. After seeing Thanos' appearance at this time, both of them showed a surprised look. The originally domineering Thanos, at this time, was lying on the broken ground with a weak face. His body was covered with blood, and he was gasping for breath. What was even more surprising was that Thanos' right arm and right leg had disappeared. Thanos, who had lost his right arm and right leg, showed an unprecedented state of weakness, and completely lost the momentum that the Universe Emperor should have. Although he saw it with his own eyes, Rog still couldn't accept that this was the domineering Thanos just now. What was wrong with him? Is this still Thanos? Not only was Rog unable to accept this, but even Gila could not believe what she was seeing. Thanos had proven his strength with practical actions, but now, if it was at any other time, Rog might be happy to see Thanos' miserable appearance. However, now, it made him feel like his enjoyment was forcibly interrupted. This is not the ending I want. Thanos should not be defeated in such a funny way. Rog could accept his own failure, but he couldn't accept this inexplicable victory, and accept this victory that seemed like charity. *CK Feeling the life aura of the Thanos getting weaker and weaker, Roger burst out a curse. Thanos lost in a way that no one thought of. Looking at Thanos, who had lost his fighting ability and was getting closer and closer to death, Rog's face was gloomy as he removed Sage Mode and stopped controlling the Buddha statue. Such an ending for you and me is a shame. Flying from the top of the Buddha statue to the front of Thanos, Rog said in a complicated tone. Thanos wanted to say something, but he struggled to say a few words, but he didn't even say a complete sentence. If there is a chance in the future, let's have a good fight again. Looking at Thanos' eyes that gradually lost their light, Rog summoned the Kusanagi sword and walked step by step to the front of Thanos. Rest assured, go. As soon as the voice fell, the silver-white Kusanagi sword was inserted straight into Thanos' forehead, completely ending Thanos' life. At the moment when the Kusanagi sword pierced Thanos' head, Rog raised his head and closed his eyes, standing in place without saying a word. After 10 seconds, he pulled out the Kusanagi sword and took off the Infinity Glove on Thanos' left hand. He threw the cracked Infinity Glove and the Kusanagi sword into the summon scroll. After Rog, who had his back facing Thanos, walked more than 10 meters away, he silently cast an Earth Release ninjutsu. Earth Release, Underworld Swamp. Thanos' body was slowly swallowed by the dark brown swamp under him. After a few seconds, it was completely integrated into the swamp and integrated with the Earth of Titan Star. When you need me to fulfill the 3 promises, you can come to Earth or Tatooine at any time to find me, or send someone to pass a message. After that, Rog opened the portal back to Deep. The long-awaited ultimate battle had ended in such an inexplicable way. His emotions had sunk to an unprecedented low. This ending was simply an insult to all the efforts he had made before. Although Gila didn't know why Rog suddenly became so lost, after seeing Rog's expression, she didn't ask a word and nodded silently, indicating that she understood. After nodding to Gila to express his gratitude, Rog walked into the portal and returned to the Hokage's office in Konoha Hidden Village. Although he didn't have many things to deal with right now, such as the supreme intelligence that was eyeing the soul gem, or the tree of life planted on Igo, or the sage body that hadn't been fully developed yet, or the Manjikyu Sharingan that hadn't evolved into Rinnegan, but now he had no interest in anything. He just wanted to sit quietly in the Hokage's office and look up at the ceiling in boredom. Thanos shouldn't have died like this. It really shouldn't have. Time passed little by little, from day to night, and from night to sunrise. After staying in the Hokage's office for a whole day, he finally stood up and came to the huge floor-to-ceiling window of the office, looking at the unknown planet in the sky. No, it can't end like this. His battle with Thanos must not end like this. Chapter 590. Thanos could die, but he couldn't die in such a dubious way. A crazy plan emerged in Rog's mind. After looking at the distant sky and thinking seriously for a few minutes, he opened the portal to Igo Star. After nearly a year of growth, the divine tree had grown into a real towering tree. At this time, the divine tree was nearly 1,000 meters high, and its lush leaves and thick branches showed a posture of covering the sky and the sun. In addition to its amazing size, the divine tree was crazily devouring the natural energy on Igo Star like a cancer cell. With the location of the divine tree as the center, the surrounding hundreds of kilometers of area had become a forbidden land for life, without any plants or life. Igo, come out. Rog, floating in front of the divine tree, said in a calm tone. Not long after he finished speaking, the blue-white divine energy gathered in front of him from all directions, and the human form of Igo quickly took shape. What do you want? The white-haired Igo looked at Rog with a vigilant face and asked silently. Since Rog planted the divine tree on him, Rog had become a nightmare for him, a nightmare that he couldn't get rid of and that came to visit him from time to time. I know you don't like the divine tree very much, so I'm going to agree to your previous request and let you accelerate the ripening of the divine tree. I just want to know now, how long do you need to complete the ripening without damaging the divine tree? In the beginning, Rog intended to let the divine tree grow to maturity on its own. But now he changed his mind. As long as it didn't affect the final chakra fruit, artificially accelerating the growth of the divine tree was not unacceptable. Half a year. Half a year in Earth time. Igo star was not a normal planet, and Igo star did not orbit the stars, so Igo could only answer Rog in Earth time. Okay, I'll give you half a year. After half a year, I'll come and take the divine tree and the fruit. As for you, you can go wherever you want, I won't stop you. Igo didn't expect that Rog would agree to his previous proposal to accelerate the ripening. A long time ago, he had tactfully suggested that the divine tree mature, hoping to end the tragic experience of the divine tree constantly devouring his life force. Although accelerating the ripening of the tree of God would cause some damage to his life force, he could accept some collateral damage after considering that he would be able to completely distance himself from Rog after the tree of God matured. A short pain is better than a long pain. That was what he was thinking. However, his suggestion was mercilessly rejected by Log as soon as it was raised. Good. That's what you said. Within half a year, I'll definitely make the divine tree mature. Although Igo didn't know what Rog had experienced, he didn't want to let go of this opportunity to regain his freedom as soon as possible and agreed. After agreeing with Igo on the maturity time of divine tree, Rog opened the portal again and returned to Titan Star where Thanos was buried. You can't die now. You can die in peace next time. After that, he manipulated chakra to quickly draw a complicated ninjutsu pattern on the ground, and dug out Thanos buried in the Netherworld swamp. He wants to resurrect Thanos. To be precise, he wants to reincarnate Thanos using Edo Tensei. It's a crazy move, but it's the only way to get rid of the knot in his heart. Rog doesn't want Thanos, this damn purple potato head, to always jump around in his memories. The Edo Tensei technique was quickly depicted. Edo Tensei requires 3 prerequisites: the technique used for reincarnation, a part of the body tissue of the reincarnated person, and a living person. Rog doesn't intend to grab a person casually to serve as a vessel for Thanos' reincarnation, and he doesn't need to do so. In the exchange page of the system, there is a living person's body that meets the requirements of Edo Tensei. When Edo Tensei Punisher was reincarnated, the system gave a man's body that was alive but unconscious and had a control technique engraved in advance. After spending his only 30 ninja coins to exchange such a body from the system, Rog put the naked man's body on Thanos Overlord. After completing all the preparations, Rog didn't hesitate and directly used Edo Tensei. Strictly speaking, this is the first time he used Edo Tensei. The last time he reincarnated Punisher, he used the Edo Tensei scroll that was exchanged from the system. This time, he relied entirely on his own ability to cast this otherworld S-class forbidden technique. With the operation of the reincarnation technique, Thanos Overlord's body began to merge with the man's body, and the gray dust that appeared out of thin air completely enveloped them. A few seconds later, when the reincarnation technique stopped, cracks appeared on his face, and the color of his skin changed from purple to purple-gray. Thanos Overlord appeared in front of Rog. Welcome back. Rog didn't expect that the process of reincarnation of Thanos Overlord would be so easy. In the beginning, he was worried about whether reincarnation of Thanos Overlord would lead to the death of one of the 5 legendary gods of the universe. After all, in some universes, death is Thanos Overlord's lover, the behind-the-scenes mastermind who bewitched Thanos Overlord to kill half of the universe. But it turns out that not every universe's death can take a fancy to Thanos Overlord. At least in this universe, death doesn't seem to be interested in Thanos Overlord. Although Thanos Overlord was reincarnated by Edo Tensei, he obviously hasn't fully reacted and looked at Rog in front of him with some confusion. You died, and I resurrected you again. Although you may not like this resurrection method, this is the only resurrection method I have mastered at the moment, so you can make do with it. Seeing that Thanos Overlord was resurrected, Rog's face couldn't help but show a trace of excitement. After hearing Rog's reminder, Thanos Overlord finally remembered something and felt his strange body with a dignified expression. After confirming the Edo Tensei's body in detail, Thanos Overlord said again, "What do you want to do? I want to have a fair fight with you, a fair fight without relying on Infinity Stones. No Infinity Stones, no helpers, just the 2 of us, Let's fight with our own abilities, regardless of life and death. Rog said very seriously. He couldn't accept the kind of victory that seemed to come from charity. He wanted to use his own strength to win against Thanos Overlord. Just for this? Thanos Overlord obviously didn't believe this reason. Just for this? Rog replied with great certainty. Ha, you are a madman, a real madman. Slayer Lord suddenly laughed out loud, unbridled and insolent. Crazy Ninja against Crazy Titan, this will be a very good battle. I accept your proposal. Chapter 591. Although the reason given by Rog was not particularly normal, Thanos Overlord was not a normal person, so he decisively agreed to Rog's proposal. Rog is a little crazy, but Thanos Overlord is not much better. A madman who has the idea of killing half of the life in the universe in order to make the intelligent race in the universe live better is no less crazy than anyone else. By the way, I have a question that I haven't figured out. What happened to you before? How did you suddenly become so weak? Since the end of the battle, Rog has been thinking about this issue. He couldn't understand how Thanos Overlord, who was not like a normal creature before, suddenly became like that. Nothing special, I was backfired by the power gem. Thanos Overlord frowned slightly and said with a calm face. Backfire? With your strength, you can still be backfired? Although Thanos Overlord is unlikely to lie at this time, Rog still can't accept this explanation. For others, it is a normal thing to be backfired when using the power gem. But this kind of thing will never happen to Thanos Overlord. In any case, Thanos Overlord is in existence at the Heavenly Father level and is a famous powerhouse in the universe. If he can't bear the power of the power gem, then few people in the universe can. What's more, the power gem and Thanos Overlord have a high degree of compatibility. They are like a pair of adulterers. Its backfire, I tried to exert the power of the power gem to the greatest extent, and as a result, I was backfired. Thanos Overlord said it very seriously, but Rog still didn't quite believe it. Looking at Rog, whose face revealed, I don't believe it, Thanos Overlord continued to explain, you and I both underestimated the Infinity Gem, or rather, the Infinity Gem is not something that people like us can completely control. Although the Infinity Gem is not a life in the conventional sense, they also have their own pride. Borrowing their power, you and I can do it. But if you want to be their master, neither of us can. People who covet great power will eventually be backfired by the power. You should also understand this very well. If the person standing in front of him wasn't Rog, Thanos would be too lazy to explain so much. Although Thanos seemed to be quite difficult to get along with, that was only for weak existences. Slayer Overlord was very patient with those who were strong or had been recognized by him. Let's not talk about the Infinity Stone, let's talk about the next battle. Although your current body of embers 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 of embers, if you fight me with the body of dirt, your chances of winning will be so low that you won't even dare to believe it. As soon as Rog said this, Thanos Overlord's face became extremely dignified. Although Thanos doesn't know what kind of ninjutsu Edo Tensei is, he can perceive that there is some kind of restriction in his body, a restriction that is naturally restrained by others. So, before the battle, you have to figure out a way to resolve the problem with the body of embankment. I can't provide any help in this regard. But I have a small suggestion. You may be able to find the help of Death, one of the 5 gods of creation in the universe. She may be able to help you solve this problem. If it's just resurrecting an ordinary person, there are many people in the universe who can do it. But to resurrect a powerful existence like Thanos Overlord who is only one step away from the Divine Father level, few people have this ability except for Death. And Rog is also very curious about whether Thanos Overlord in this world can still get the favor of Death. Okay, I will find a way to solve this problem. Even if Rog doesn't remind him, Thanos Overlord will find a way to get rid of the body of embankment and really resurrect. Whether it's from the degree of matching or personal preference, Thanos Overlord prefers his original body. Then you can do it. I look forward to the day when you are truly resurrected. As for the battle between you and me, let's make it a year later on Earth time. At that time, I should be able to reach my true peak state. The divine tree will only bear chakra fruit after half a year, and considering the adaptation time, Rog thinks that 1 year is a more appropriate time. If nothing goes wrong, he will be able to reach the true peak of the ninja profession at that time and become the god of ninja recognized by the system. No problem, 1 year is enough. Golden Jack, main control room. I have solved the matter of Thanos Overlord. He will not come to you again. You can go back and continue to be your bounty hunters. After agreeing with Thanos Overlord on the time of the next battle, Rog opened the portal and returned to the Golden Jack. Can we go? Star-Lord asked with some uncertainty, and after speaking, he did not forget to turn his head and look at Gamera. Yes, you can go wherever you want. Rog, sitting in the captain's position, said lightly. What about the Soul Gem? Supreme Wisdom already knows the whereabouts of the Soul Gem. After a few seconds of silence, Gamera asked. I will take care of this. Supreme Wisdom can't get the Soul Gem. Supreme Wisdom is just a life computer, and there is no such thing as true love, so it is absolutely impossible for him to get the Soul Gem through sacrifice. But Gamera wanted to continue to say something, but before she finished, she was interrupted by Rog. No buts, you can go now, I need to be alone. Rog issued an eviction order. When Star-Lord and others and the raiders brought by Yondu all left the Golden Jack, Rog said to the battleship's artificial intelligence system, Captain Jack, full speed to Womer. Although it was impossible for the Supreme Intelligence to obtain a soul gem by offering a sacrifice, just in case, Rog still decided to personally make a trip to Womer to deal with or take away the paternity appraiser, Red Skull, who was guarding the soul gem. Just as he was heading towards Womer on the Golden Jack, a group of Carry Empire troops had already appeared on Womer, which was a place where humans were rarely seen. After Rog and Thanos Overlord both left Hala, Supreme Wisdom immediately sent the Carry army to Womer in an attempt to take the soul gem into their pocket. Because of the distance, it took a whole day for the Carry army, which was tasked with bringing back the soul gem, to arrive at Womer from Hala. At this time, the treasure hunting team composed of 3 Carry Empire battleships had just arrived at the mountain peak where the soul gem altar was located. Chapter 592. Red Skull, the guardian of the soul gem, was now floating on the edge of the semicircular altar, overlooking the Carry Empire army at the foot of the mountain. Looking at this fully armed and high morale army, he couldn't help but recall his own Hydra army at that time. Thinking of this, he sighed silently. Back in the day, he was considered a big shot on Earth. He had almost achieved his great dream of ruling Earth. At that time, he had people, money, and the Tesseract that was said to have unlimited energy. However, all of this was ruined by the man wearing a tight uniform and holding a round shield. If it weren't for that man, he wouldn't have been exiled to this godforsaken place by the Tesseract, and he wouldn't have been cursed by the soul gem and become like this. I want to go back to Earth. I want to eat Frankfurter again. I want to drink Bavarian white beer again. I want to drink pea soup again. At this time, Red Skull completely ignored the Carry Empire soldiers who were going up the mountain. His mind was full of his favorite German food. As a notorious ambitious man, Red Skull's ambition was once very big. But after being exiled to this damned place and being restricted to the vicinity of the altar, his ambition became the same as those who tried to search for the soul gems. He became a corpse buried in the ground. Now, he has completely lost the idea of conquering the world. Compared to conquering the world, he wants to have a good German lunch, preferably the kind with unlimited supply of sausages and beer. He wants to eat the traditional German food that he once disdained and even regarded as a waste of time. It didn't take long for these Carry soldiers, who were armed with advanced energy guns of the Carry Empire, to come to the side of this not-too-wide altar. Because of the size of the altar, these Carry soldiers can't even reach the top of the mountain. Only the first few dozen people are qualified to set foot on the top of the mountain where the altar is located. If you want to get the soul gem, You need to sacrifice your true love. As long as you can push your true love off the altar with your own hands, you can get the soul gem. Red Skull ignored the energy guns behind him that were aiming at him and said silently without looking back. Explaining the method of obtaining the soul gem to those who were heading to the altar was a curse given to him by the soul gem. Of course, the soul gem didn't forget to give him the ability to see through the identity of every visitor, so he could know who the descendant of every person who reached the altar was. If it were any other time, he might have followed the soul gem's requirements and displayed his paternity test abilities. But these heavily armed carry warriors reminded him of his own Hydra soldiers, so he skipped the paternity test step and told them how to get the soul gem. Although he didn't look back, Red Skull was sure that these carry warriors wouldn't dare to shoot at him, because these carry warriors were just pawns of some big shot. After hearing Red Skull's words, the carry warriors didn't move their guns away, but they revealed the same astonished expression. Not to mention that they were not sure whether what Red Skull said was true or not. Even if what Red Skull said was true, they had no way to complete the sacrifice now. No soldier would take their loved one on a mission. Even if they agreed, their commanding officer would not agree. This is a bit awkward. These carry warriors don't mind giving their lives for the supreme wisdom, but that doesn't mean they are willing to sacrifice their loved ones' lives to complete the task of the supreme wisdom. Not everyone is as ruthless as Thanos, who can sacrifice their true love without blinking an eye. At this time, Rog didn't know what happened on the soul altar, but he was ready to go to the soul altar and not see Red Skull. The supreme wisdom has shown his desire for the soul gem. As long as he doesn't have a lazy cancer, he will definitely send troops to Womir as soon as possible. Even if Red Skull was taken away or killed by the Carry Empire's warriors, it would not be a particularly strange thing. Red Skull is just a side mission for him to go to Womir. What he really intends to do is to destroy the soul gem altar. Of course, this kind of thing may be a little risky for him to do. For example, encountering the resistance of the soul gem and so on. Therefore, he intends to borrow the power of the power gem and completely destroy the mountain where the soul gem altar is located. After all, only infinity stones can fight against infinity stones. Compared with the treasure hunting team sent by the Supreme Wisdom, Rog's luck was a little better. It takes a whole day to set off from Hara to Womir, but it only takes him 40 to 50 minutes to go to Womir. In addition to the relatively close distance in space, the most important thing is that the universe where he is located has an interstellar jump point to the universe where Womir is located. He only needed to jump once, and he would be able to reach the Womir star's domain. Then, he can take the Golden Jack and directly land on Womir. When Rog went to Womir at full speed, the carry warriors on the soul altar also sent the information back to Hara that they needed to sacrifice their loved ones to get the soul gem. The news was sent back, but they didn't know when they would get the next instruction from the Supreme Wisdom. The universe is very big. If there is no star jump point, it will even be so big that it will make people desperate. Time passed little by little, just as the carry warriors on Womir were patiently waiting for the next order from the Supreme Wisdom. The Golden Jack broke through the atmosphere of Womir and flew to the sky where the altar mountain was located. The Empire's warship? How did they come so quickly? Maybe they just happened to be carrying out a mission in the nearby universe? That makes sense. I wonder which officer's main ship is it? As the warriors of the Carry Empire, they certainly wouldn't be unfamiliar with the Empire's main warship. Although the warship they rode was also one of the main warships of the Empire, the strength of the main warship couldn't be lumped together. When the Golden Jack slowly descended and became clearer and clearer, these carry warriors began to feel that something was wrong. This was the exclusive warship of the highest officer of the Accusation Corps. It was the main warship of the Empire that only Ronin was qualified to own. At this time, these carry warriors finally remembered a piece of news that once caused a strong sensation in the Empire. The fourth Hokage of Earth defeated the Accusation Corps' Supreme Commander Ronin and took away Ronin's warship. Chapter 593. The reason why these Kree warriors were so certain that the person who came wasn't the accuser Luonan was because before they set out, They just happened to hear the news of Luo Nan's right arm being destroyed by Thanos. The Kree Empire's famous powerful Luo Nan had his right arm destroyed by the crazy Titan Thanos in the plaza of the Supreme Wisdom's Palace. Even though not many people knew how Thanos and Luo Nan fought, the news of Luo Nan losing his right arm and Warhammer quickly spread. Ever since Luo Nan lost to Rog for the first time, his prestige within the Kree Empire had gradually declined. And when he lost to Rog for the second time on planet Sokka, his prestige within the army and among the people had reached an all-time low. If it wasn't for the Supreme Wisdom's trust in him, it was unknown whether he could continue to be the supreme accuser of the accuser group. Considering Luo Nan's current situation and his experience of having his warship stolen by Rog, these Kree warriors were 100% certain that the warship flying above their heads was the one that Rog stole from Luo Nan. Why did he come here? Did he also want the soul gem? Right when these Kree warriors raised their heads to look at the golden jack in the sky with vigilance, Rog sat in the captain's seat in the main control room and calmly gave the order to attack. Even though there were many Kree warriors on the mountain peak, they weren't the primary targets of the golden jack. What the golden jack was attacking right now was the 3 Kree Empire warships that sent them over. Boom, 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 boom. Under the gaze of these Kree warriors, the golden jack fired all kinds of colored energy rays and solid artillery shells. It was like a goddess scattering flowers as it vented its attack on the 3 warships that only had basic operators left. Even though they were all part of the Kree Empire's main fighting force, the golden jack used its actions to prove the difference between the main forces. Under the powerful cannon fire of the golden jack, the 3 Kree Empire warships couldn't even put up a decent defense. Accompanied by the dazzling explosion, they quickly fell from the sky while emitting black smoke. The primary target has been destroyed. Do you wish to begin attacking the secondary target? The mechanical voice of Sparrow echoed mercilessly in the main control room. Attack! Although there were hundreds of Mikri warriors on the altar, they only had individual weapons. There was no way they could deal any fatal damage to the golden jack. This was also the main reason why they were only secondary targets and not primary targets. Through the huge display screen in the main control room, Rog could clearly see Red Skull in a tattered black cloak floating on the edge of the altar. He was not worried that Red Skull would die under the gunfire of the golden jack. In the past, Red Skull might not have been able to withstand such a bombardment, but the current Red Skull could definitely withstand it. Now Red Skull is the guardian of the Soul Gem. Although the Soul Gem does not give him strong combat power, it is not a simple matter to kill him under the protection of the Soul Gem. Boom, 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 boom. The mountain where the Soul Gem altar was located was not very tall and majestic in the first place. Under the powerful firepower of the Golden Jack, this nameless mountain experienced the most miserable experience in history. The mountain road was rugged, and the small mountain with rugged rocks suffered a fierce attack like a natural disaster. The flames of the explosion and powerful shockwaves continued to light up everywhere. Under the fierce attack of the Golden Jack, the Kree warriors on the mountain were quickly reduced at a terrifying speed. Not even a slightly intact body was left. Although the casualties of the Kree warriors were heavy, not everyone was so unlucky. Those Kree warriors who officially stepped into the range of the altar became the lucky ones favored by the goddess of luck. Rog did not let Sparrow deliberately skip the area where the altar was located. The cannonballs and energy beams fired by the Golden Jack at the altar and the 2 tall stone pillars were no less than other areas. But these cannonballs and energy beams were detonated in advance by an invisible force when they were about to hit the altar and the stone pillars. Not only that, the shockwaves generated by the explosion were also blocked by this invisible force, and it did not really hurt the altar and the 2 stone pillars. After seeing this scene that did not conform to common sense, Rog could not help but think of the words that Thanos said before. Infinity Stones have their own pride. Whether Infinity Stones are really arrogant or not, Rog was not sure now. But after seeing the scene in front of him, he could basically confirm that Infinity Stones have a certain living characteristic, or rather, have a certain self-consciousness. The Power Stone did not want to be completely controlled by Thanos, so it backfired on Thanos. The Soul Stone did not want to be destroyed by the altar, so it resisted the attack that hit the altar. In addition to these two examples in front of him, Red Skull floating on the altar can more or less prove this point. Although the space stone in the Tesseract did not recognize Red Skull, it did not kill him. Instead, it sent him to Womir and let him become the guardian of his brother. Red Skull was not the first Earthling to touch the Tesseract, but he was the only one who was sent to Womir by the Space Stone. This more or less proves that this is the result of the Space Stone's active choice. When all the Carry warriors outside the altar died under the gunfire of the Golden Jack, Rog stood up from the captain's position and opened the portal to the altar. After I leave, you return to Tatooine by yourself, don't wait for me. After that, Rog walked into the portal and went from the main control room of the Golden Jack to the semicircular altar of the Soul Stone. He did not look at the Carry warriors when he officially stepped on the altar of the Soul Stone and went straight to the floating Red Skull. Tell me, where did I come from? Rog looked at Red Skull and said with an expressionless face. The Soul Stone gave Red Skull the strange ability to see the identity of all visitors, and it could even say the biological father that the visitor did not know himself. So Rog was curious whether Red Skull, who has the ability of paternity testing, could see his origin. The floating Red Skull slowly landed on the altar and looked at Rog in front of him seriously. After a dozen seconds, he frowned and shook his head. Can't see it? The strange ability given to him by the Soul Stone disappeared at this moment? It looks like you can't see it, then I'm relieved. Rog said to Red Skull with a smile. Then, before Red Skull could react, his right fist wrapped in chakra slammed into Red Skull's face. Chapter 594. No one thought that after Rog finished asking, he would suddenly punch Red Skull. In particular, Red Skull himself did not expect that he would be punched solidly, and it was even on his own face. If it was before he was exiled, even if he couldn't block Rog's punch, he would definitely be able to react. Boom! Red Skull, like a baseball hit by a bat, drew a beautiful arc in the air and slammed into the circular altar at the foot of the mountain from the edge of the semicircular altar. The huge impact made Red Skull hit a conspicuous crater in the circular altar at the foot of the mountain. If it weren't for the soul gem giving him some strengthening, Rog's punch would have killed him directly. After punching Red Skull down the altar, Rog looked back at the vigilant and puzzled Carry warriors. Shadow Clone. Rog didn't intend to kill these Carry warriors himself. He summoned a Shadow Clone and gave the task of killing these Carry warriors to the Shadow Clone. Later, under the gaze of these Carry warriors, he used the super light rock technique and slowly floated down the altar and came to Red Skull again. It seems that the soul gem is quite good for you. It even helped you strengthen your physique. Although the main power of the soul gem is concentrated in the soul domain, as a universal treasure, the soul gem does not lack the ability to strengthen others. The strength of the soul will definitely bring about the strengthening of the body. This is a very simple truth. A fragile body can't support a strong soul. Who are you? The last time he was beaten up was more than 70 years ago. Roger's punch made Red Skull feel pain that he had not felt for a long time, and it also aroused his dissatisfaction. Although he has become like this, Red Skull used to be the leader of Hydra. The experience of exile may have changed some of his ideas, but it could not completely erase the pride in his heart. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that I want to teach you a good lesson. As soon as his voice fell, Rog launched another attack on Red Skull lying on the ground. From the perspective of the people on Earth, Red Skull was definitely not weak. After all, he was a man who could compete with Rogers of the American team. Unfortunately, the enemy he was facing now was Rog, who was known to be powerful in the universe. Rog didn't need to use any ninjutsu at all. He didn't even need to use any profound taijutsu. Just by using his own physical strength, he could completely crush Red Skull. Under his attack, Red Skull couldn't even make a decent defense and became a human sandbag under his fist, bearing his storm-like punches and kicks. After abusing Red Skull for 5 or 6 minutes, Roger stopped this one-sided overwhelming attack and lifted Red Skull, who was unable to move. There are 2 reasons why I hit you. The first is because the Hydra you established has caused me a lot of trouble. Although it's all small trouble, it's very annoying. As for the second reason, it's very simple, because you're ugly. The former leader of Hydra and now the guardian of the soul gem, at this time, was lifted by Rog like a defenseless baby, without the previous superior demeanor. You're stronger than me. Whatever you say. Although he was hurt by Rog, Red Skull knew very well that Rog did not kill him. Otherwise, the pain he was feeling right now wouldn't just be physical pain. Looking at Red Skull, who was resigned to his fate, Rog released his right hand and let him fall to the ground. What should be vented has been vented, then it's time for a pleasant cooperation, Rog said with a kind tone and a smile on his face. However, after hearing his words, Red Skull suddenly felt a chill all over her body and looked at him with vigilance. What do you want to do? Red Skull asked tentatively. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Rog. I'm a ninja. I have the small title of Fourth Hokage in the outside world. Ninja is a profession that relies on performing other people's commissions to get paid. If you don't mind, I hope I can take a small commission from you. Even the well-informed Red Skull couldn't keep up with Rog's thoughts at this time. Especially when Rog said these words like a gentle and kind lawyer, he had an idea that Rog was schizophrenic. Just now he beat him like a barbarian, and now he told him that he wanted to take a commission from him. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't beat him and couldn't escape, Red Skull would definitely choose to stay away from Rog. What commission do you want from me? Red Skull asked slowly, puzzled. It's very simple. You entrust me to take you back to the Earth. After returning to the Earth, you can give me some appropriate reward. Although most of your Hydra has been eliminated, there are still some stubborn loyalists left. I don't want much. After you return to the Earth, reorganize your Hydra, and then give me the funds, equipment, and antique collections in Hydra. Of course, you can also simply understand it as buying your freedom with Hydra's money. At this moment, Rog was like a bewitching demon as he slowly spoke to Red Skull. That's it? It's that simple. It's a good deal for Red Skull to exchange Hydra's funds, equipment, and other materials for his freedom. Although he didn't know what Rog was going to do, he decisively agreed to Rog's proposal. Sign this commission scroll and we will officially have a cooperative relationship. The reward is simple. Just write $1 billion first. As for the other things, a verbal agreement will do. I believe in your character. Rog didn't intend to let Red Skull's commission occupy the commission quota for too long, so the reward written on the scroll was much less than what they agreed on. Red Skull didn't speak. After taking the commission scroll from Rog, he quickly wrote it. Commission content. Bring Red Skull who is cursed by the soul gem back to the Earth. Commission status. Incomplete. Commission reward, 30 ninja coins. Red Skull's commission passed the system's judgment smoothly. Although the system only gave 30 ninja coins as a commission reward, this is acceptable for Rog, who has 0 ninja coins. Anyway, this is just a commission. It's good enough to pass the system's judgment. Chapter 595. After closing the system's commission page, Rog took back the commission scroll that only had commemorative value left from Red Skull and threw it back into the psychic scroll. Just as he was about to take out the infinity glove from the psychic scroll, he suddenly stopped and frowned in serious thought. The soul gem was a gem with self-consciousness. Otherwise, it wouldn't have set the condition that one had to sacrifice one's true love to obtain it. Since it had consciousness, it meant that it could be communicated. With this in mind, Rog temporarily put aside the idea of using the strength gem to destroy the soul gem altar and smiled at Red Skull, who had just stood up. I'll accept your commission, but I have a small request. I hope you can help me with it? At this moment, although Rog looked amiable, Red Skull couldn't help but take a few steps back and ask warily, tell me what it is first, and I'll consider agreeing to it. Red Skull had seen many strange people. To a certain extent, he was a strange person himself. But from his point of view, Rog was the real strange person, a powerful and strange person with strange ideas. It's very simple. I hope you can tell the soul gem that I want to meet it and have a good chat with it. Chat with the soul gem? What does he want? Red Skull once again showed a puzzled look. I can't tell it. Although I'm its guardian, I've never seen it, much less communicated with it. After some thought, Red Skull slowly said, "You can do it. You can do it. You are the man chosen by it. You can definitely do it." Red Skull had never communicated with the soul gem before, but this didn't mean that he couldn't communicate with it. "I really don't." Before Red Skull could finish speaking, he saw Rog's left eye turn blood red. He saw the crazily spinning triangular dart pattern on the blood-red eye. "Tsukuyami." Rog didn't give Red Skull a chance to continue speaking. He directly cast Tsukuyami on him and pulled his mind into the Tsukuyami world that he controlled. Red Skull didn't realize what had happened at all. When he reacted again, he had already appeared in the Tsukuyami world with the red moon hanging high in the sky. Unlike the previous experiencers, Red Skull was not hung on a cross, but sat on a classical and luxurious European-style high-back wooden chair. In front of him, there was a long table with some classic German sausages and bread. Of course, there was also the German beer that Red Skull had been longing for. Rog sat on the high-back chair opposite the long table. He supported his cheek with his right hand and said slowly, "You should be familiar with these German delicacies. Try them. The taste should be quite authentic. I have a few restaurants in New York that specialize in German cuisine. The chefs there are all from Germany. The raw materials used in every dish are also shipped over via international flights every day. It's all for the sake of creating the most authentic German flavor." At this time, Rog was like an old friend of Red Skull, recommending the German delicacies in front of him. Although Roger wasn't interested in doing business, he was still a human. Once he had a lot of money, he would have some inexplicable large expenses. Opening restaurants in New York from various countries was one of the ways he wasted his huge fortune. "Aren't you eating? I thought you would more or less miss the traditional delicacies of your hometown after leaving Earth for so many years." As he spoke, Rog picked up the silver fork on the plate, forked a German minced meat sausage, and put it into his mouth. The taste wasn't bad. It was exactly the same as what the fat chef in the restaurant made. Although these foods weren't real, they could give the consumer an extremely realistic taste in Tsukuyami world. Of course, the premise of all of this was that Rog had tasted these foods before. He looked at Rog, who was munching on the minced meat sausage, and then at the various German delicacies on the table. He subconsciously swallowed his saliva. Don't worry about the safety of the food. These aren't real food. They will only give you an extremely realistic taste buds. After finishing the minced meat sausage, Rog put down his fork and explained. He picked up a glass of Bavarian white beer to moisten his throat. Red Skull, who was sitting on the high-back chair, looked at Rog with a complicated expression. In the end, he couldn't resist the temptation of the delicacies of his hometown. More than 10 minutes later, Red Skull, who had eaten his fill, leaned back in the high-back chair and asked in puzzlement, "Aren't you going to have a chat with the soul gem? Why did you suddenly arrange such a delicacy for me?" "That's right. I want to have a chat with the soul gem. This meal is mainly to make up for the mental damage you will suffer later." As soon as Rog finished speaking, Red Skull thought of something. However, it was all too late. Before he could do anything, the scene in front of him changed again. Tsukuyami Level 2. In the Tsukuyami world, Rog cast Tsukuyami on Red Skull again. This time, what appeared in front of Red Skull was no longer the middle of the night with the crimson moon hanging high in the sky, but a gorgeous space that resembled a starry sky. At that moment, Red Skull was like a child who had just learned to speak as he asked innocently. Rog didn't answer Red Skull because it wouldn't make much sense to answer. Although Red Skull still maintained his skeleton-like appearance, his mind wasn't as mature as a 3-year-old child's. This was Red Skull's subconscious space, or rather, where his true ID was. Tsukuyami Level 2 was a discovery Rog made by chance after possessing Kodo Amatsukami. Although Tsukuyami and Kodo Amatsukami had reached a certain pinnacle of illusion, the principles behind the two were completely different. Tsukuyami could pull the target's mind or consciousness into the Tsukuyami space and give the target a physical experience in the Tsukuyami space. As for Kodo Amatsukami, it could fundamentally change the target's views and concepts. In the beginning, Rog didn't pay much attention to the difference between the two. However, when he was having some academic discussions with Hinata, he suddenly realized that using Tsukuyami in Tsukuyami could achieve the effect of completely entering the target's subconscious like Kodo Amatsukami. After entering the target's subconscious space, as long as he grasped the correct method, he could completely change the target's concept from the subconscious level, allowing the target to treat the modified concept as his original concept. Although he had entered Red Skull's subconscious space, Rog had no intention of modifying or prying into Red Skull's subconscious. The reason he came here was to see the soul gem. Red Skull thought that he had no way of communicating with the soul gem, but in fact, when he obtained the soul gem's curse and obtained the paternity test ability, he already had the ability to communicate with the soul gem. However, he didn't know this. Chapter 596. At this time, you still don't want to show up? Rog ignored Red Skull next to him and said to the gorgeous starry sky in front of him. Don't look at the fact that there were only 2 people here with Red Skull. When he entered here, the soul gem detected his arrival for the first time. As an infinity stone that controls the soul domain, the soul gem has a unique advantage in perception. Not to mention that Rog also took the initiative to enter the subconscious space of the man he chose. After that, Rog waited patiently. However, after a few minutes, he still did not get any response from the soul gem. You really don't want to come out? Then don't blame me for making a move on your guardian. As soon as his voice fell, Rog stretched out his right hand and reached out towards Red Skull beside him. Just at the moment when his right hand was about to touch Red Skull's neck, the soul gem finally reacted. In other words, it finally appeared in front of him. Red Skull, who had a silly look just now, seemed to have changed into a different person in an instant, and his body involuntarily exuded an ancient aura like the universe. Why do you want to see me? The appearance was still the same, and the voice was still the same. But at this time, Red Skull did not have the childish behavior and aura of a previous child at all, giving people a strange feeling as if he was talking directly to the universe. Nothing, I just want to talk to you about a deal. In addition to the soul gem, Rog has more or less touched the remaining 5 infinity stones. Although only the reality gem and the power gem belong to him directly, this is enough to keep him calm and collected in the face of any infinity stone. It may be difficult to determine the winner between a single infinity stone, and the power depends on the user's own strength. However, when 2 infinity stones cooperate with each other, they can definitely defeat any infinity stone without any suspense. This is the biggest confidence of Rog in the face of the soul gem. Deal? You make it sound nice, but you just want my power. Why do you have to use the excuse of a deal? Obviously, the soul gem did not believe Rog's statement at all. I can understand why you don't believe me. After all, you should have seen many people who covet your power. But I'm really different. I'm not too interested in your power. I just don't want you to fall into the hands of those who aren't on good terms with me. You can trust my judgment. If I don't like her, you shouldn't like her either. Rog said unhurriedly. With the reality gem and the power gem in hand, whether the other infinity gems are in his hands or not is not particularly important to him. However, this did not mean that he would allow others to obtain the soul gem. This was not a matter of being greedy or overbearing. It was purely to avoid unnecessary trouble. After a few minutes of silence, the soul gem controlled Red Skull to continue. Tell me, what is your so-called deal? In the end, the soul gem relented and stopped rejecting Log's request. The deal I want is very simple. Your location and the method of the sacrifice will be known by a certain person that I don't like. So, I'm going to destroy your altar directly and completely eliminate the possibility of you being obtained by him. Of course, if you don't mind, I can also take you to Earth to meet your other brothers and let you have a good chat. As soon as Rog finished speaking, Red Skull in front of him exuded a very oppressive aura, fully expressing his dissatisfaction. Destroy my altar, take me to Earth, this is your so-called deal, aren't you looking down on me too much? If it weren't for the fact that Rog's soul could not be harmed in the subconscious space of Red Skull, the soul gem would like to let Rog taste the pain from the soul right now. After living for so long, It was the first time that he had encountered someone who dared to threaten him in this way to talk about the so-called deal with him. This was simply going too far. Don't be so excited, the situation is actually not as bad as you think. Rog first calmed the mood of the soul gem, and then continued, your altar being destroyed is actually not a loss for you. Ask yourself, are you really willing to let those messy people borrow your power? So instead of using this way of sacrificing your true love to test those who covet your power, you might as well take the initiative a little bit and choose a user that you like and can see through. This is just like getting out of singleness. You can't expect to get out of singleness by staying at home. You have to take the initiative to go out and find ways to meet different people of the opposite sex, then you may meet the destined soul mate. Otherwise, do you expect your destined soul mate to get to know you who stays at home through robbing? You're not a young man anymore, you can't always wait for others to come to you. Waiting passively will only make you wait for an unreliable scumbag. At this time, Rog was like an emotional expert, providing emotional advice to the single soul gem. Although he said a lot, in summary, it could be summarized in one sentence. That is, I'm going to tear down your home and take you away while I'm at it. The soul gem did not expect that Rog would use this theory to explain the content of the deal. This made the soul gem, who had seen countless people, suddenly have a feeling that it had stayed in Womer for too long and could not keep up with the current era. Just as the soul gem was thinking about whether this deal was really worth it, Rog continued, after leaving here, you don't have to worry about being bored at all, and you don't have to face humans like Red Skulls who don't look particularly good all the time. Do you know, I have a good palace, and your good brothers, Reality and Strength, have a VIP seat in it. If you don't mind, I can also arrange a VIP seat for you. When the time comes, whether the three of you want to have a good chat or fight the landlord, it will be very suitable. Of course, if you want to play mahjong and are short of one player, I can also play a few rounds with you to pass the time. If you still want to see the rest of your brothers, I can also arrange an opportunity for you to meet. By the way, you know, now except for you, your other brothers have a good place to belong. People are most afraid of comparison. I think Infinity Stone should be similar to Infinity Stone. You don't want to be the only single stone. Chapter 597. Although Soul Gem had existed for many times longer than Rog's lifespan, it was clearly far from being a match for Rog when it came to spouting nonsense. Men were most afraid of being told that they were inferior to others. Although Rog didn't know the gender of Soul Gem, from the fact that Soul Gem didn't reject being brothers with the Reality Gem, Strength Gem, and other gems, it was likely a man. At the very least, in terms of mentality and thinking, it was more like a man. After a few minutes of silence, Soul Gem finally controlled Red Skull again and said, I know you're talking nonsense, but what you said makes sense. The few of them can find a suitable home. There's no reason why I can't find one. I agree to your deal. I'll go to Earth with you. You don't have to destroy my altar. No matter what, this is my home. I don't like others tearing down my home. Soul Gem finally agreed to Rog's deal. However, only he knew the answer to whether it was because he didn't want to lose to other Infinity Gems or because he was tired of staying on planet Womer. However, none of this was important. What was important was that he was willing to leave with Rog. As long as Soul Gem was willing to leave, everything else was trivial. You definitely won't regret your decision today. There are now more than 7 billion people on Earth. I believe you will definitely be able to successfully find your soul mate. After saying that, Rog first dispelled Tsukuyami Double Stare, allowing Red Skull's subconscious to return to the Tsukuyami world. Then he dispelled Tsukuyami and allowed Red Skull's consciousness to return to his body. When Rog and Red Skull's consciousness returned to their bodies, the altar on the mountain peak shone with a gorgeous aurora-like light. These gorgeous lights followed the two huge rectangular stone pillars into the sky and flew into the huge round hole in the clouds. As the gorgeous light surged in, lightning-like silver-white light flowed out of the round hole in the clouds. When the silver-white light completely enveloped the entire world, Rog, who was in the circular altar below the mountain peak, suddenly felt an uncontrollable drowsiness. In the blink of an eye, he completely lost consciousness as though he had fainted. When he opened his eyes again, he saw the lavender starry sky of Womer. At this moment he was lying in a small puddle near the peak of the altar. The cold water instantly woke him up. Without any hesitation, he raised his right hand and opened his tightly clenched right fist that was glowing with orange light. In the palm of his right hand, there was a yellow gemstone the size of a finger that was emitting an orange glow. Soul gem. This was the soul gem that Thanos needed to sacrifice Gamora to obtain. Looking at the soul gem in his palm, Rog smiled with satisfaction. The third Infinity Stone was in his hands. Although the current soul gem was far from being able to recognize him, this was not important. Rog was not the kind of person who wanted both a person and a heart. As long as he could obtain the physical body of the soul gem, it would be enough for him. After looking at the soul gem for a while, he summoned the Infinity Glove and the Reality Gem from the Medium Scroll. After taking out the Power Gem from the Infinity Glove, he placed the Reality Gems, Power Gems, and Soul Gems in a row. Then, he used the ability that came with the system when he practiced Sage Mode. Inherent Enchantment, Shikatsu Forest. Just in an instant, the Shikatsu Forest with unbelievably rich natural energy appeared in front of him. Looking at the Taiha treasure vault not far in front of him, Rog directly disappeared with the Flying Thunder God and instantly came to the inside of the main hall of the Taiha treasure vault. On the 12 display platforms in the middle of the main hall, the 6 display platforms on the right were placed with the Eternal Fire, Hellfire, and Surtur's crown. Compared with the display platforms on the right, the 6 display platforms on the left were empty and had no treasures. The first one on the left, the red Reality Gem. The second one on the left, the purple Power Gem. The third one on the left, the yellow Soul Gem. After placing the 3 Infinity Gems in the order of the time they were obtained, Rog glanced at the symmetrical display platforms on both sides. 3 treasures on the right, 3 treasures on the left. Perfect symmetry. OCD was very satisfied. However, at this moment, he took out Thanos' Infinity Glove, which he didn't know where it came from, and there were already some cracks on it. Should I put this here as well? Although this Infinity Glove has some cracks because of overuse. But in any case, this is the top equipment that can withstand the power of Infinity Gems. In terms of preciousness and commemoration value, this Infinity Glove is better than the 12 sacred tools he got from the Blood Breed. After thinking about it seriously for dozens of seconds, he finally gave up the plan to destroy the symmetrical display of the treasures in the main hall and placed the Infinity Glove in the side hall where the 12 sacred tools of the Blood Breed were located. After doing all this, he lifted the inherent enchantment, Shikatsu Forest, and began to sense the location of Red Skull. At this time, Red Skull was still on the circular altar at the foot of the mountain, silently waiting for Rog's arrival. Although he didn't know what Rog talked about with the Soul Gem, the vision that just happened in the sky proved one point. That is, the Soul Gem has reached a consensus with Rog. Since the big shots on both sides have already talked, then as a younger brother, he just has to wait patiently. It didn't take long for a hemispherical, aurora-like energy shield to appear in front of his eyes. When the energy shield dissipated, Rog appeared in front of him. I have already talked to the Soul Gem, and you don't need to continue to stay here as an altar commentator. I'll take you back to Earth now. As soon as his voice fell, Rog put on the hanging ring and drew a circle in front of Red Skull. Within a few seconds, a portal connecting to Washington on Earth appeared in front of them. Let's go! After that, Rog took the lead to cross the portal shining with golden sparks and return to Washington at noon. When Rog entered the portal, Red Skull in a tattered black cloak walked into the portal step by step. Back, finally back. Red Skull never thought that after being exiled by the Space Gem, he would be able to return to Earth one day. When Red Skull came to his side, Rog closed the portal that was consuming his magic power frantically. This is Washington, you should remember where this is. The direction of the gate is on your left. If you have nothing else to do, you can leave now. After you reorganize your Hydra, remember to transfer the $1 billion entrusted to me. This is my account number. You can transfer the money directly. The sooner the better. Don't take more than a month. After that, Rog patted Red Skull, who was looking up at the sky, left a flying Thor on him, and handed him a card with his bank account number. Although Hydra is a bit miserable now, $1 billion is not difficult for Hydra. As for how Red Skull will reorganize Hydra that once belonged to him, it is his own business and Rog does not intend to ask. As long as Red Skull can transfer $1 billion and package Hydra's funds, equipment, antique collections and so on according to the verbal agreement, he and Red Skull will be even. Chapter 598. After Red Skull disappeared from his sight, Rog used quantum transmission to return to his office. Although in the eyes of the outside world, this is still the headquarters of Konoha's intelligence agency. But in fact, this is only a branch of Konoha's hidden village in the Washington area. Most of the personnel and equipment were transferred to Konoha's hidden village on the planet Titan. Except for the larger area and the more official personnel of Konoha, there is no difference between here and the branch of Konoha's intelligence agency in other cities. Sitting on his sofa chair that is said to be perfectly ergonomic, Rog silently thought about what to do next. The final battle with Thanos is scheduled to be in a year, and the God Tree will mature in half a year. This means that he needs to improve his Sage Mode and Sharingan to the limit in the first half of the year. If possible, it is better to awaken Rinnegan so that he can enter the best state to take the chakra fruit. After completing these things, he can eat the chakra fruit produced by the God Tree, so that his physique is infinitely close to the Otsutsuki clan, and reach the peak strength of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who has the titles of Goddess of Uno, Shinobi World Creator, Ancestor of Chakra, and so on. At that time, he can really boast that, I am the god of Shinobi. Of course, this process will not be easy, and there may even be some unimaginable accidents. But in any case, this is what he must do in the next year. Thinking of this, he opened the system's character panel and browsed his attributes. Host, Rock Profession, Ninja Talents, No Seal Technique, 7 Attribute Chakrakekei Genkai, Menjikyu Sharingan, Mokan, Byakugan, Dust Releasage Mode, Shikatsu Forest Sage Mode, Inherent Barrier, Shikatsu Forest, Jinchuriki, Kyubi, Resonance, 5, Non-Attribute Ninjutsu, Substitution Technique, Flicker Technique, Hold Technique, Transformation Technique, Shadow Clone Technique, Flying Thor. Second level, Rasengan Series, Summoning Technique, Tongue Seal 5 Attribute Ninjutsu, Fire Release, Water Release, Lightning Release, Wind Release, Earth Release Genjutsu, Sharingan Genjutsu, False Memory, Memory Seal, Dark Walk Taijutsu, Monstrous Strength, Hyuga Gentle Fist, Hashiman Tonkudojutsu, Tsukuyami, Kodoamatsukami, Forest Manifestation, Susan Sealing Technique. 4 Symbols Seal, Vajra Seal, Immortal Technique, Bright God Gate Chakra Quantity, 0. 85 Jars, 0. 5 for Main Body, 0. 35 for Tailed Beast, Immortal Body, Senju Hashirama Immortal Body, 95% Development, Summoned Beasts. Frank the Punisher, Edo Tensei, Bronsky the Abomination, Fenrir the Great Wolf Artifact, Tatsuka Sword, 2 remaining uses, Yada Mirror, 2 remaining uses, Unconsumed Ninja Coin, 0. The system hasn't mastered all the ninjutsu he has mastered. After all, he has mastered too many 5 attribute release jutsu. If he had to display them one by one, his attribute panel would become very long. In addition, the system also didn't display any genjutsu or genjutsu that are integrated with other forces, such as Hell, Sage Mode, Might Suit, Susanoo, Reality Genjutsu, and other genjutsu. Looking at his current attribute panel, he couldn't help but recall the time when he had just crossed into this world. At that time, in his ninjutsu column, there was only one ninjutsu, Flying Thor. Relying on this Flying Thor, he accumulated ninja coins little by little, selected and exchanged the right ninjutsu, and strengthened his strength little by little. That was really a period of poverty. He didn't know why, when he recalled the experience of being a private investigator, an idea that was both intuition and foresight suddenly popped up in his mind. In the battle a year later, he will die. He will die in the hands of Thanos. For ordinary people, this kind of sudden idea may be just a random thought without any reason. But for someone like him who was only one step away from becoming a divine father, such an idea suddenly popping up in his mind may mean a reminder of fate. It shouldn't be, right? Rog frowned and pondered. After thinking about it seriously for more than 10 minutes, he finally gave up the deduction of the battle a year later. Don't think about it, if Thanos can really grow to the point of killing him in a year, it is also the ability of Thanos. Time passed day by day. Unknowingly, 3 months have passed since he returned to Earth. In the past 3 months, he has been practicing his Sage Body and Sharingan step by step, pushing them to the extreme little by little. More than 2 months ago, Red Skull transferred $1 billion to his bank account as agreed in the commission, which gave him a small amount of pocket money. In addition, Red Skull also sent the funds and equipment as agreed verbally, as well as some antiques. As for whether these were all in Hydra, he didn't delve into it and thought that Red Skull had fulfilled the promise. After the system sent the reward of Red Skull's commission, he accepted some commissions as a private investigator and re-experienced the detective career that he had just transmigrated to this world. Of course, when accepting and executing commissions, he used transformation jutsu to change his appearance and did not perform these commissions in the name of Fourth Hokage. These commissions were not difficult at all, but they also provided him with a lot of ninja coins, which increased the number of ninja coins he had not consumed to 165. After having these ninja coins, he didn't go to the system to exchange anything, but saved all these ninja coins as he had previously exchanged ninja coins for Sharingan. Practice, execute commissions, continue to practice, continue to execute commissions. This was his main life for the past 3 months. During this period, he also took the time to fulfill his promise to the Soul Gem and took the Soul Gem to Asgard and Kamardaj, letting the Soul Gem see the Space Gem and the Time Gem once. He originally planned to see the illusion as well, but when he contacted Tani, Tani told him that the illusion had been lost for a long time. Yes, the illusion with the Soul Gem on his forehead has been lost. Although Fu Lien tried their best to find the illusion, unfortunately, they never found the whereabouts of the illusion. In addition to the disappearance of the illusion, Fu Lien also encountered a very troublesome thing recently. The blood race, who had been extorted by Rog for 12 sacred tools, actually brought their ancestor Cain back to the world. Not only that, but the blood race also appeared in the eyes of the world, completely breaking their commandment of seclusion. He didn't know what those blood race were thinking, but after the appearance of Cain, they took the initiative to provoke a battle with Fu Lien. What's even more surprising is that Fu Lien actually lost. Fu Lien lost in the hands of Cain. If it wasn't for the fact that Tony managed to get a few divine weapons that heaven had left behind on Earth, the Avengers would have been gone by now. Chapter 599. The Avengers were in decline. Thor, one of the 6 Titans, didn't come to Earth much anymore. He stayed in Asgard all year round to deal with government affairs. Walter and Pietro, who were supposed to join the Avengers, became part of Konoha because of Rog. Although Hulk was still in the Avengers, he didn't agree with the Avengers' philosophy at all. He would continue to stay in the Avengers purely because of Natasha and Banner. If it were up to him, he would have left the Avengers long ago. Phantom, who had the Soul Gem and the Vibranium Body, could have made up for the decrease in combat power when Thor wasn't in the Avengers. But now, no one knew where Phantom had gone. As for Tani, Rogers, Captain America, and the others, they were very strong in the eyes of ordinary people. But in the face of real high-level combat power, they lacked the absolute strength to make the final decision. In the past, the appearance of the vampires would have been handed over to Konoha's Intelligence Bureau and dealt with by Konoha. But this was already in the past. Ever since the New York Accord, Konoha's Intelligence Bureau didn't care much about these things. The current Konoha's Intelligence Bureau was like a fishing unit that only received a salary and didn't do any work. Unless the vampires and Cain took the initiative to attack, Konoha wouldn't take the initiative to do anything. In the past, when Konoha was in charge of these things, the government and the people felt that Konoha's approach was too domineering. But now, when the vampires and the other dark races appeared, They began to miss the time when Konoha was in charge of these things. At least at that time, under the domineering style of Rog and Konoha's intelligence bureau, no organization or dark race dared to jump out and go against the government so blatantly. In fact, a week ago, Rog received a call from Secretary of State Ross and a few military bigwigs, hoping that Konoha could continue to perform some of its previous duties. But Rog rejected them without even thinking about it. Konoha wasn't so cheap that they could come and go as they pleased. Even if Konoha was still receiving a salary from the government, Rog didn't give them any face at all. If they weren't happy, then they could just stop Konoha's funds. Anyway, Konoha didn't count on these funds now. 3 months ago, when he started the last Sage Body and Sharingan practice, Rog gave the order to Number 2 of Konoha's Hidden Village to open interstellar trade. The current Konoha Hidden Village can now trade with other planets to obtain the materials they need. It's worth mentioning that after Konoha started interstellar trade, the rope grass slavers, which had a good reputation in the slave-catching industry, was officially disbanded. Sakura's head, Sakura Worlds of Konoha's Caravan. With the help of Noah and other veterans who used to make a living in the gray area, Konoha's interstellar caravan developed very smoothly, bringing back a lot of rare resources for Konoha. New York, Manhattan. When Rog enjoyed an absolutely authentic French lunch with Gwen in his own French restaurant, he just left the restaurant and planned to return to his secret home with Gwen. Suddenly, he was stopped by this year's latest Audi R8 sports car at the restaurant's door. Except for Tani, there's no second person who likes to drive an Audi R8 sports car and dares to stop in front of him. Sure enough, as soon as the silver-gray Audi stopped, Tani, wearing a handmade suit, stepped down from the driver's seat and came to him with a gloomy face. "Why didn't you answer my phone?" Tani took off his sunglasses and said with a bitter tone. If Tony wasn't a man, his current tone would easily make people think of a girl whose boyfriend had a change of heart. "I didn't bring my phone." Rog glanced at Tani and answered indifferently. "You really don't care about anything, you weren't like this before?" Tani continued. "Really? Why didn't I know? I've always only done what I want to do. I don't think I've changed." Although Tani hasn't said it yet, Rog was 100% sure what Tani's purpose was. In fact, this wasn't the first time Tani came to him. A few days ago, in Washington, Tani and Natasha also came to him once, hoping that Konoha could help deal with the vampire issue. Last time, it was indeed the bastards from the capital and the military who were wrong, but I hope you can help deal with the vampire issue this time for the sake of our past friendship. You also live here. You don't want to see corpses with blood sucked dry every day on the streets. Although the number of vampires was small, after taking the initiative to start a war with the Restoration Alliance and the government, the vampires always had an absolute advantage. The reason for this one-sided situation was inseparable from the return of Cain, the ancestor of the vampires. According to Rog's knowledge, after Cain's return, every vampire had a visible improvement. Almost every vampire's strength had increased by 1 nobility rank. In particular, Grand Duke William and the other vampire dukes had touched upon the legendary realm of the Vampire King. Of course, because he hadn't fought with the upgraded Grand Duke William and the others, Rog wasn't sure how powerful this so-called realm of the Vampire King was. However, when facing the Restoration Alliance and the human army, these vampires showed an overwhelming advantage. Not to mention the dark magic of the vampires, it was purely a form of attack. Just the vampires' ridiculously strong physical fitness alone was troublesome enough. Yes, the vampires were indeed afraid of special bullets such as ultraviolet bullets and holy water bullets. However, the problem was that ordinary human soldiers couldn't even aim at the vampires. What was more troublesome was that the vampires also had the ability to embrace and transform blood slaves. After a while, the Restoration Alliance and the military helplessly found that not only did the number of vampires not decrease significantly, but it also showed a trend of increasing. With Cain, the ancestor, the third of the 6 precepts of the secret party, the descendant precepts, had completely disappeared. Every day, A large number of ordinary people were transformed into vampires and blood slaves. What made people feel even more helpless was that many people chose to join the vampires in an attempt to obtain a longer life by transforming into a vampire. This phenomenon was especially obvious among the elderly and the young people in their teens and 20s. The elderly chose to become vampires in order to prolong their lives that were nearing the end. Meanwhile, the young people saw becoming vampires as a trend and an opportunity to change their lives. Chapter 600. Although the vampires were far from perfect creatures, under the temptation of ultra-long lifespan and extraordinary power, many people still took the initiative to throw themselves into the arms of the vampires and gave up their human identity. And these humans who joined the vampires also became the most troublesome target for the Avengers and the military. First of all, I don't care what the UA becomes. Even if this place becomes the country of the vampires, it doesn't have much impact on me. You should know very well that I'm not an American. In fact, until now, I've been using a fake identity bought from the black market, so I have no obligation to help this country. Secondly, if you come to me as a friend, I'm happy to help you once, just like you helped me before. But if you come to me as the person in charge of the Avengers and an American superhero, then I can only say sorry. Okay, I've said what I wanted to say. If you don't have anything else, I'm leaving. After that, Rog pulled Gavin next to him and turned to leave. From the perspective of friends, Tawny was indeed a good friend. But there was one thing he never realized. Tawny received a traditional American-style elite education, and his way of thinking and behavior had a very obvious American style. If Rog was also an American, he might agree with him. But unfortunately, Rog was not an American, and he had no feelings for this country. Watching Rog and Gavin go farther and farther, Tawny sighed helplessly, then drove his latest Audi R8 sports car and disappeared at the end of the street. Are you really going to ignore the vampires incident this time? I heard from Dad that there have been a lot of vampires in New York recently, and many workers on the night shift have been attacked. Gavin asked cautiously. What? You want me to attack these vampires? Rog stopped, turned to look at Gavin and asked slowly. I don't know. I hope you can protect more people, but I'm afraid you will get hurt. I saw Hulk's news. The vampire ancestor Cain is very strong, Gavin whispered with a tangled expression. Don't worry. If I attack, Cain will be the one who gets hurt. Don't forget, I'm the 4th Hokage, the strongest ninja on Earth. As he spoke, Rog stretched out his right hand and patted Gavin's head. He also saw the news about Hulk that Gwen had just mentioned. After knowing that Hulk had been injured by Cain, he secretly went to the Avengers headquarters to meet Hulk. How should he put it? Cain was indeed quite strong. He had defeated the entire Avengers, including Hulk, by himself. But after communicating with Hulk, he found out why Hulk and Fu Lien had lost so badly. The reason was simple. It was a one-sided suppression on the level of magic. Whether it is Hulk who has mastered the Hashman Tawny, Tawny who has an Iron Man armor, or Rogers who can fight with anyone for a while, they are all typical physical attack heroes. In front of Cain, whose dark magic is superb and whose physical fitness is incomparably strong, they could not exert their proper combat power at all and were defeated by Cain with an absolute advantage. Although magic can be called another science that has not been mastered by humans, magic is actually quite unsolvable without mastering the same system of abilities. A simple example is that if Rog threw Hulk into the mirror dimension space, then even if Hulk mastered the Hashman Tawny, he would never be able to come out in a short time. Without enough countermeasures, magic is so unsolvable. Therefore, Hulk and Fu Lien's loss to Cain was not unjustified. And according to Hulk, Cain had the opportunity to quickly deal with them at the time, but Cain held back and did not kill them. It was precisely because of Cain's mercy that Tawny had the opportunity to bring the heaven weapons that had always been considered antiques to repel Cain and the other vampires. Why Cain held back on Fu Lien, Rog did not know. But one thing he was sure of was that Cain and the vampires were deliberately controlling the situation, and they did not let things develop to the level of a disaster and a race war. Except for the cities in the United States, There was no case of vampires attacking humans in other countries. All of the vampire attacks were concentrated within the borders of the United States. Furthermore, the scale of the attacks was not considered large, far from the scale of a large-scale war. In fact, the scale of the attacks was not even as large as the previous two battles between Roger and the military. Don't think too much. If things really develop to the point of no return, I will definitely go to Kane and talk to him. No matter what, I'm still a human. After temporarily dispelling Gwen's worries, Rog returned to his secret nest in New York with Gwen. Time flies, and unknowingly, a week passed. After accompanying Gwen for 2 or 3 days in New York, Rog returned to Konoha Hidden Village on Tatooine and began his cultivation again. Sage Mode Development Progress. 100%. After more than 3 months of cultivation, he finally raised the development of his Sage Mode to 100%, allowing his Sage Mode to reach the same level as Hashirama. The complete development of his Sage Mode brought him 3 significant changes. The first is the increase of chakra. Coupled with the QB chakra he can currently borrow, his total chakra has officially surpassed Hashirama's, reaching 1 pillars. Among them, the amount of chakra that belongs to him is 0. 7 pillars, and the amount of chakra that he can borrow from QB is 0. 4 pillars. The second change is that his Manjikyu Sharingan has officially been upgraded to the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. In fact, after he obtained the Sage Mode, the side effects of Manjikyu Sharingan have been suppressed to a minimum, and there is no overuse of it that will cause blindness. But after he fully developed his Sage Mode, his Manjikyu Sharingan was upgraded to the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. However, unlike the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his memory, his Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan did not bring any changes to his pupil tattoo. He wasn't too conflicted about this. The reason is simple, because his Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan was forcibly upgraded through Hashirama's Sage Mode, not by transplanting other people's Manjikyu Sharingan. The third change brought about by the complete development of his Sage Mode is related to Mokutan. He doesn't know if it's because Hashirama's Sage Mode can perfectly match Mokutan, but after developing his Sage Mode to 100%, he found that using Mokutan doesn't consume much chakra. Compared with before, the amount of chakra he needs to use Mokutan is reduced by about half, and he has more detailed control of the plants he creates. Chapter 601. Compared with the improvement of chakra and Eternal Mangekyo, the improvement of Mokutan seems a bit insignificant. But in any case, this can effectively improve Rog's combat effectiveness in Mokutan. After all, before he could only cast 1 Mokutan ninjutsu with chakra, but now he can cast 2 Mokutan ninjutsu. This also means that if he only uses Mokutan in battle, his chakra is equivalent to twice as much as before. After adapting to the fully developed Sage Body, Rog left his exclusive Hokage training room and came to the office of the Hokage building. Although he is the Hokage of Konoha Hidden Village, with Artificial Intelligence number 2 and Hinata, he doesn't need to deal with too many internal affairs of the Hidden Village, and he only needs to make final decisions on some major events. Just when he finished dealing with the few village affairs and planned to return to his mansion to have a good rest, number 2's mechanical synthetic voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Hokage-sama, the Konoha Intelligence Agency headquarters on Earth has received a message from Kamartaj's New York temple. Should we check it now? Kamartaj? After hearing number 2's report, Rog froze for a moment. Although he has the name of Kamartaj and Ancient One student, he has always taken the initiative to contact or go to Kamartaj, and Kamartaj has never taken the initiative to contact him, a wandering sorcerer. Show it directly. As soon as his voice fell, a huge holographic virtual projection appeared in front of him. This is a video message, and the one on the video is a typical Asian face. This is Wang? Looking at the slightly chubby face in front of him, Rog recognized his identity at a glance. Rog, Ancient One hopes that you can return to Kamartaj as soon as possible. If you are not free, come back as soon as possible. Rog is no stranger to Wang. The current Wang is not the same as he remembered. He is not the administrator of Kamartaj's library, but the guardian sorcerer of New York Temple. Although he didn't know why Ancient One was looking for him, after watching King's video message, Rog put on the hanging ring and opened the portal back to Kamartush. As his right hand continued to draw circles, a portal shining with golden flames quickly appeared in front of him. Just as he was about to step into the portal, he suddenly remembered something and said to number 2 without looking back, "Tell Hinata that I'm back on Earth, and I'll have dinner with her next time." After that, he stepped into the portal and directly returned to Kamartaj from Konoha Hidden Village on Tang. Although he hadn't come to Kamartaj for a while, Kamartaj was still the same as in his memory. Mages Kamartaj, who were dressed in various colors, were cultivating in an orderly manner. There were also apprentice mages who had just joined and were still learning portal magic. There was also a beginner mage who was training in magic weapon combat. There was also a mage wearing a dark red mage robe. His hands were trembling uncontrollably as he flipped through a magic tome that was thicker than a brick under a stone bench in the shade of a tree. Who's this? Although it was the first time he saw him in person, if his memory is correct, this man with a sexy mustache is his junior brother, the future Doctor Strange Stephen Strange. He has come to Kamar. Does that mean that Ancient One is going to? A thought flashed in Rog's mind for an instant. It shouldn't be, right? According to the timeline in his memory, Ancient One did choose to die not long after Strange's arrival and handed over the responsibility of Sorcerer Supreme to Strange. But the problem is that the current timeline is no longer the timeline in his memory. Taking a look at Strange, who was trying to learn by himself, Rog turned and walked towards the hall where Ancient One often made tea. Sure enough, after entering the hall, he saw Ancient One making honey tea. "Sensei, are you looking for me?" Rog sat on the chair opposite Ancient One and asked respectfully. "Yes, try my newly developed tea first. I changed it to honey. See if it suits your taste." After that, Ancient One placed a cup of steaming tea in front of him. Looking at the honey tea with a color similar to Chinese medicine, Rog swallowed his saliva, picked up the teacup and took a small sip. The taste is not bad, maybe it would be better without honey. Rog still doesn't like Ancient One's habit of adding honey to tea. Compared to this kind of honey tea, he still preferred pure tea from China. "When you came, you should have also seen your junior brother Strange. What do you think of him?" Ancient One asked slowly after taking a sip from the teacup. "What do I think of him? He is your chosen successor. What else can I think of him? I just met him for the first time. I don't know his personality very well, so I can't evaluate him." After thinking for a few seconds, Rog gave his answer. "You are lying. You may have met him for the first time, but you are definitely not a stranger to him." Ancient One put down the teacup in his hand and said meaningfully, "That's boring. What's the difference between this and digging into someone's past? Teacher, you are right, but since he is your chosen successor, I think he will definitely live up to your expectations." Rog said with a smile and rounded the question. "If it was before you appeared, I would not hesitate to train him as the next Sorcerer Supreme and give him the responsibility of guarding the Time Stone. But now, I am beginning to hesitate on this point." Having said that, Ancient One looked at Rog with a complicated look. "What does this have to do with me? I am just a part-time sorcerer." "Teacher, don't say that you think I am also qualified to inherit the position of Sorcerer Supreme. I am just a part-time sorcerer. This kind of heavy responsibility is better left to those orthodox sorcerers. Although you can get the Time Stone after inheriting the position of Sorcerer Supreme, but compared with the need of Sorcerer Supreme to protect the Earth from the invasion of the multiverse, the temptation of the Time Stone is obviously not enough. To be precise, for Rog, who already has 3 Infinity Stones, the temptation is not enough. He never had the idea of becoming a guardian of the Earth. Compared with this kind of self-sacrifice guardian of the Earth, he wants to be a free ninja. You think too much. The Time Stone doesn't like you, and your magic talent is far from being comparable to Strange. As you said yourself, you are only suitable to be a part-time sorcerer. Ancient One shook his head with a smile and picked up the bamboo fan that he carried with him. "What do you mean, teacher?" Rog asked. "I asked you to come over this time in the hope that you can guide Strange and let him increase some actual combat experience. I heard about the blood race and I also met with Cain. The current blood race incident in the United States is very suitable to be Strange's first action. Chapter 602. You want me to guide Strange? Teacher, are you kidding me? Before coming to Kamartish, Rog thought about why Ancient One was looking for him at this time. He guessed a lot of reasons, but he didn't guess this. What? You don't want to? Ancient One waved his bamboo fan gently and said unhurriedly, It's not a matter of whether I want to or not, it doesn't make sense. I am a ninja, you want me to guide a sorcerer, and he is also your designated heir, isn't this a joke? And aren't you worried that after being guided by me for a while, Strange will become as overbearing and arrogant as me? If it was anything else, Rog might have agreed directly. After all, Ancient One is his teacher. But asking him to guide the future Dr. Strange is a bit too difficult for him. Others may not know, but he knows very well that being the teacher of Dr. Strange will not end well. If he really becomes overbearing and arrogant under your guidance, it can only mean that he is not suitable to be the supreme sorcerer. Okay, you don't have to say any more, it's decided. Or do you think that you can compete with me now that you have 3 Infinity Stones? Having said that, a provocative and threatening expression appeared on Ancient One's face. Can you win? How would I dare? Since teacher has said so, then I'll guide this little junior brother. Although there was 100,000 reluctance in his heart, Rog finally agreed to Ancient One's request. Can't you train your own heir? Why would you let a ninja guide you? This is neither scientific nor magical. After saying goodbye to Ancient One, Rog reluctantly left the hall and walked in the direction of Dr. Strange. At this time, Strange was still immersed in the sea of magic knowledge, and he didn't notice that his nominal senior brother had come to him. Looking at Strange, who was browsing the magic books attentively, Rog couldn't help but recall his previous experience when he received 9 years of compulsory education. After standing beside Strange and looking at him for a minute or two, Rog deliberately coughed to let Strange notice his arrival. You are? Strange, who was obviously older than Rog, raised his head and asked in confusion. My name is Rog. You might have seen me on TV or in the newspaper before. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that I am also a student of Ancient One. According to seniority, you should call me senior brother. Rog quickly introduced himself. Rog? You are that Rog. Strange felt that Rog looked familiar just now, as if he had seen him somewhere before. After hearing Rog's self-introduction, he immediately reacted. The 4th Hokage, the director of Konoha's intelligence agency, the man who destroyed Wakanda. That's right, it's me. Don't look at me like that. I don't eat people and I'm not a psychopathic murderer. I just told you that I am also a student of Ancient One, and I am your senior brother. Although Strange didn't say it out loud, Rog had seen through his thoughts from his eyes and expression. In fact, Strange can't be blamed for this. It's purely because the impression he left in the minds of the people before was a little too overbearing. What are you looking for me for? Although he was very curious why the legendary 4th Hokage suddenly appeared in front of him and claimed to be his senior brother. However, Strange is also a person who has seen big scenes after all. He quickly calmed down and asked about Rog's intentions. I don't know if Ancient One told you, but she just told me to guide you for a while and take you to deal with the current vampire incident in the United States. If possible, Rog really doesn't want to pay much attention to the vampire's affairs. This is why he has always refused Tani's request to the military. But he didn't expect that Ancient One would actually ask him to deal with the vampire's affairs, and with Strange, the new sorcerer. Ancient One told me that there would be a new sorcerer to guide me for a while, but she didn't say it was you, and aren't you a ninja? When did you become a Kamartage sorcerer? Like Rog, Strange didn't expect that Ancient One would arrange for Rog to guide him, which made him frown unconsciously. Strange knows that Rog is very strong, and he is a ninja who can fight against the US military by himself. But he also doesn't understand why Ancient One would make such an arrangement. I am indeed a ninja, and sorcerer is just my part-time job. Although I am not a pure sorcerer, I am proficient in magic, and it is not a problem to guide you. Rog doesn't know how much magic Strange has learned now. However, Judging from the fact that he is still reading the Sanskrit version of the basics of magic, he won't be joining Kamartaj for too long. Really, that's not necessarily the case. As he spoke, Strange silently closed the book that was as thick as a brick. Then, as if he was performing a finger dance, his hands quickly danced. A few seconds later, golden whips connected to each other appeared between his hands. Light of magic. When Strange just made the first magic gesture, Rog knew what magic he wanted to use. However, he didn't stop Strange. Instead, he allowed Strange to cast the spell. When the golden magic whip in his hands took shape, Strange raised his right hand and tried to throw the magic whip in his hand at Rog. However, at the moment he raised his right hand, Rog's body quickly emerged with magic fluctuations. Hold human spell. In just an instant, Strange's whole body was completely fixed, maintaining the posture of trying to whip Rog with the magic whip. Hold human spell. This is not a compulsory spell for Kamartaj's mages. Although this spell is also collected in Kamartaj's library, there are not many Kamartaj's mages who really learn this spell. He doesn't know if it's because of tradition or the aesthetic of Kamartaj's mages are similar. They all prefer the kind of golden magic. Don't waste your energy. Unless your spirit and magic power are higher than mine, you won't be able to break free from the shackles of this spell. Glancing at Strange, who was trying to get rid of the effect of Hold Human spell, Rog came to the stone bench next to him and sat down straight. Then he lifted the Hold Human spell on Strange. Sit down and talk. Chapter 603. Strange didn't expect that he, who had already stepped into the gate of magic, was still no different from ordinary people in front of Rog. In fact, until now, he hadn't recognized what kind of magic Rog had just used. How are you going to guide me in dealing with the vampires? Isn't this what Konoha's intelligence agency should do? Like others, Strange also regarded these supernatural events as the responsibility of Konoha's intelligence agency. First of all, Konoha will not deal with this vampire incident. Konoha is not the nanny of the police and the military, and it is not interested in intervening in this matter. In addition, it's not how I'm going to guide you in dealing with the vampires, but how you plan to deal with it. I will only give you some advice and guarantee that you won't die in the hands of the vampires. You have to deal with everything else by yourself. Although it was Ancient One's request, Rog still had no interest in guiding Strange. With this kind of effort, he might as well instruct Hinata on how to fight in ninjutsu battle. At least Hinata is much cuter than Strange. I understand, nominally you are my instructor, but in fact, you are just my bodyguard. Strange showed an expression of understanding. You summed it up very well, so now can you tell me, how are you going to deal with the current vampires? Also, let me remind you, you'd better not have the crazy idea of completely eliminating the vampires. This is Strange's first foreign action, and Rog doesn't want his little brother to have the great dream of completely eliminating the vampires. Don't worry about this, I have self-awareness. In the next 10 minutes, Strange roughly described his ideas to Rog. Although he has been staying in Kamartaj recently, he is no stranger to the vampires in the United States. Kamartaj is indeed a mage organization, but this does not mean that Kamartaj will be completely isolated from the world. In fact, Kamartaj has many of this year's latest technological products. Most of them were sent by Konoha under Rog's arrangement. For example, Sony's latest game console. Since you already have an idea, then let's follow your plan. After saying that, Rog put on the ring and drew a circle in front of Strange. In a few seconds, the golden portal back to New York was completely formed. Do you have anything else to pack? If you don't, you can leave now. Before entering the portal, Rog turned around and asked Strange. After Strange put away the magic book on the stone table, he followed Rog into the portal. Rog didn't take Strange to Konoha's New York branch. Instead, he took Strange directly to Konoha's New York temple. This time, it's a private job, so he doesn't intend to use Konoha's power, and he doesn't need to use Konoha's power. The two of them had just passed through the portal and arrived at the New York sanctum when Wang, holding a one-handed staff, hurriedly appeared at the staircase on the second floor. After seeing that it was Rog and Strange, King put away the staff in his hand and walked down from the second floor. Then he asked in confusion, "Why are you here?" Ancient One arranged some tasks for the two of us. Rog didn't tell King what their specific task was. King is just the guardian sorcerer of New York Sanctum. As long as the blood breeds are not crazy enough to attack New York Sanctum, then this matter has nothing to do with King. Then help yourself. If you want to use any magic tools, you can go to the exhibition hall on the second floor to get them. Of course, the premise is that the magic tool is willing to let the two of you use it. After saying that, King, who had a staff around his waist, walked directly towards the door. It's just lunchtime now, and the Fat King doesn't want to miss any of his lunches. If you go out for lunch, help pack two back. When King was about to leave the sanctum, Rog stopped him and psychically took out his wallet from the psychic scroll. After handing a few $100 bills to Queen, he took Strange to the second floor of the sanctum. After coming to the hall where the magic tools were placed, Rog went directly to the levitation cloak and said to Strange, "Communicate with this cloak and see if you can respond to it." When he first came to New York Sanctum, Rog had the idea of the levitation cloak. But unfortunately, this magic cloak with the ability to fly and self-awareness didn't take a fancy to him. The more advanced the magic tool, the more picky it is towards the sorcerer. And this pickiness has nothing to do with strength, it's purely a matter of fate. In the history of Camargue, there are many cases of beginner sorcerers getting the recognition of powerful magic tools. And obviously, the future Doctor Strange is one of them. When Strange came to the levitation cloak according to Rog's instructions, the levitation cloak, which looked no different from an ordinary cloak, floated up automatically and flew around him a few times. Then, the crimson magic cloak took the initiative to drape itself on Strange's body. When the time came to the early hours of the morning, Rog and Strange, who had a good rest, left the New York Sanctum under the cover of the night. They didn't choose to go through the main entrance, but came to the roof of the sanctum and flew out of the sanctum. After an afternoon of communication and recuperation, Rog roughly figured out the true strength of his junior. Although the future Doctor Strange was proficient in various types of magic, the current Strange could only use one hand to count the number of magic spells he knew. In addition to the teleportation gate, mirror dimension and Ragador ring, the only magic spells Strange knew were astral projection and light of magic. Whether it was the time he learned magic, the magic he mastered, or his combat experience, the current Strange was a complete novice sorcerer. Fly 5 blocks to the left, there are 3 vampires, their strength is negligible. Strange didn't have any perception detection methods, so Rog not only had to be his bodyguard, but also his guide, lest Strange flew around like a headless fly. "Okay, I got it." After receiving Rog's reminder, Strange didn't hesitate and turned to the left block. It didn't take long for them to fly to the designated location and looked down at the 3 vampires in the alley. Judging from the behavior of these 3 vampires, they should be the humans who took the initiative to throw themselves into the arms of the vampires. Are you planning to wait for these 3 vampires to eat and drink before making a move? Seeing that Strange didn't make a move, Rog said slowly and pointed to the middle-aged woman who was about to pass by the alley. Chapter 604. Strange looked in the direction of Rog's finger and saw a plump middle-aged woman holding a brown shopping bag tightly. Obviously, this is a lady who has just finished her night shift. He doesn't know if those vampires forgot to carry out rookie training, but these newly transformed, newborn vampires like to attack ordinary people who have just finished their night shift in the middle of the night. But after thinking about it, this is quite normal. After all, these newborn vampires can't grow to the point where they are not afraid of the sun in a short time. Therefore, night and early morning naturally become the most suitable time for them to hunt. Will they really attack that lady? Strange asked a very newbie question. Otherwise, or do you think the 3 of them deliberately gathered in the alley to have a fierce game of landlord? If Strange was not his junior brother, and this was a direct request from Ancient One, Rog really had a plan to turn around and leave. But Strange can't be blamed for this. Although he is now a sorcerer, Not long ago, he was a neurosurgeon who saved people with a scalpel in his hand. It was indeed a little too difficult for him to mentally prepare himself to kill right now. According to the walking speed of that lady, you still have 1 minute to mentally prepare yourself. If you still can't make up your mind, that lady will become a corpse that dies of excessive blood loss in front of you. Although vampires suck blood, unless they encounter extreme circumstances, vampires generally do not suck all the blood of the target. And in many cases, vampires do not suck blood to maintain their own survival, but just to satisfy their own perverted desires. For example, they enjoy the look of fear shown by humans before death, or kill humans to prove their strength, etc. I see. After speaking, Strange, wearing a floating cloak, began to fly towards the dark alley where the 3 vampires gathered. Be careful of being bitten. Rog did not forget to give some safety advice to his junior brothers. When Strange flew towards the 3 vampires, Rog landed on the roof of a nearby building and sat on the edge of the rooftop to observe Strange. Although Strange was a doctor before, he was now a mage who had received Kamartaj's basic mage education. He did not stupidly land in the alley. Instead, he quickly waved his hands and prepared his first spell. This was the mirror dimension? Not bad, not too stupid. Just by looking at Strange's gesture, Rog recognized the magic he intended to cast. Although Rog wasn't sure why Strange wanted to increase his home field advantage or because he didn't want the next battle to affect the innocent bystanders, he still gave a good evaluation. He didn't get nervous because it was his first battle, and he didn't lose his judgment because he was outnumbered. Just based on these 2 points, Strange was much stronger than the others. Of course, this could also be related to his previous occupation. After all, neurosurgeons were a profession that required absolute calmness. After preparing the spatial mirror in his hand, Strange instantly increased his flying speed and fell into the alley like a meteor. Then he slammed the mirror space magic that he had already prepared on the ground. In the blink of an eye, the unique spatial fluctuations of the mirror dimension swept through the alley like a hurricane and finally enveloped the entire street. When the unique spatial fluctuation of the mirror dimension arrived in front of him, Rog, who was sitting on the roof, reached out his right hand at lightning speed. It was as if he had broken an invisible glass, causing the space in front of him to fold strangely like broken glass. Strange's magic control was good, but at this time, he made a mistake that he shouldn't have made. He isolated his bodyguard, Rog, from the mirror dimension. So Rog could only do it himself and let himself enter the mirror dimension that Strange unfolded, lest he really become a bystander. The 3 vampires who were waiting for their prey in the alley didn't expect that what they were waiting for was not a prey that could give them a full meal, but a mage with a golden circular magic shield in both hands. Ragador Ring, Kamartaj's compulsory magic. Like the ninja school's 3-body technique, Ragador Ring was also a spell that wasn't difficult to learn, but had a large range of use. Watching Strange and the 3 vampires staring at each other, Rog unhurriedly retrieved a bottle of Iced Fatty's happy drink from his medium scroll and started drinking leisurely. Novice Mage vs Newborn Vampire. This seemed to be a coincidence, but in fact, this was the result of Rog's deliberate choice. There were more than just these 3 vampires active now, there were also vampires closer to New York's Holy Temple. But considering Strange's current strength, Rog deliberately chose these 3 newborn vampires that had just been converted not long ago. After a few dozen seconds of stalemate, the 3 vampires took the initiative to attack Strange. Compared to werewolves, vampires were a more calm dark race. But this was only limited to those vampires who already had a noble title. For newborn vampires, especially those that had just been converted from humans, they often couldn't control their thirst for blood and their mentality of suddenly having extraordinary strength. Therefore, these newborn vampires would often act more beastly than werewolves. In fact, most of the vampires that had injured humans were done by these newborn vampires. Under Logue's gaze, the 3 newborn vampires sprinted towards Strange like wild beasts, revealing their extremely long canine teeth that were characteristic of their race. Facing the attacks of these 3 newborn vampires, Strange didn't show any fear, and constantly adjusted the position of his hands according to the direction of the attacks. Clang, 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 clang. When the claws of the three vampires hit the rings of Ragador in Strange's hands, the rings of Ragador let out a metallic clashing sound. At the same time, the hovering cloak on his body flew out of its own accord and tied up the blood breed in front of him tightly. When the hovering cloak bound one of the vampires and brought him to crash into the other two vampires, Strange decisively retreated a few steps and removed the Ragador ring in his hands. Although the magic power of the Ragador ring could cause some burns to these vampires, these burns wouldn't take long to be healed by the regeneration ability of vampires. Therefore, Strange decisively gave up on counterattacking tactics and decided to use offense instead of defense. Magic light. A second or two later, a magic whip flickering with golden sparks appeared in Strange's hands. Chapter 605. In the minds of most people, mages were a group of people with weak physiques. But Kamartaj's mages were a bit different. Among the many mages, Kamartaj was one of the few mages who would make close combat a compulsory course for newcomers, and also had a certain requirement for the mage's physique. To some extent, Kamartaj's mages were similar to Rog's impression of those battle mages, who would cast a light spell, then add buff spells such as bull strength and cat's agility to rush forward. When the light of magic condensed into a golden magic whip, Strange didn't hesitate and directly waved the whip in his hand towards the vampire in front of him. Pa 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 pa. Strange was just a neurosurgeon with a surgical knife before, but when he swung the magic whip in his hand, Rog saw a trace of proficiency that didn't match his profession. This kind of proficiency made Rog couldn't help but associate it with some unique hobbies belonging to a minority group of people. White coat, long whip, howling man. Some inappropriate images appeared in Rog's mind. It shouldn't be, right? When such an association appeared in his mind, the way he looked at Strange became a bit strange. At this time, Strange didn't know what Rog was thinking, and he didn't know that Rog had already silently labeled him in his heart. With the help of the hovering cloak, Strange, who was fighting one against many, not only did not fall into a disadvantage, but he also beat the three new vampires in front of him. After being whipped by Strange again and again, the three vampires who also had no combat experience involuntarily had the idea of retreating. However, this idea of retreating could only be in their minds. Mirror dimension. Although these three vampires didn't know what kind of magic mirror dimension was, they soon found that something was wrong. Although the surrounding environment looked very normal, when they came to the intersection of two blocks like fleeing wild dogs, they were stopped by an invisible transparent wall. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't cross this transparent wall that they couldn't see at all. Trouble. At this moment, the three newborn vampires finally understood why Strange slapped the ground fiercely when he arrived at the alley. After confirming that they were completely trapped by an unknown magic, the three vampires also completely dispelled the idea of retreating and looked at Strange behind them with fierce eyes. After becoming vampires, this was the first time they encountered such a situation. However, they quickly calmed down. It's just a human who has mastered some extraordinary abilities. Don't be too arrogant. Vampires are the strongest. After exchanging glances with each other, the three vampires attacked Strange again. Although the magic whips condensed from the light of magic would make them feel a burning pain, it was far from threatening their lives. Moreover, the vampires were born with powerful regenerative abilities, which gave them enough confidence in fighting Strange. Isn't it just a burn? I don't care. However, the three vampires soon discovered that they had underestimated Strange. Just as they madly ran towards Strange like mad dogs, Strange, who was wearing a hovering cloak, flew up to the air more than 20 meters above the ground. If flying up was just to avoid the attack of the three vampires, then Strange's following action was equivalent to sounding the death knell of the three vampires. Just as the three vampires looked at Strange in the air helplessly, Strange removed the magic whip in his hand and put on the necessary tool for casting teleportation gate magic. After putting on the ring, Strange drew a circle in the air. In a few seconds, A golden circular teleportation gate with a diameter of several meters appeared on the ground where the three vampires were standing. The teleportation gate flickering with golden sparks quickly took shape, and the three vampires standing on the ground quickly fell under the influence of gravity. The teleportation gate Strange opened wasn't a teleportation gate to leave the mirror dimension space, but a teleportation gate in the air. Is he planning to kill the three vampires? Seeing Strange open the teleportation gate under the feet of the three vampires, Rog couldn't help but think. However, it turned out that he had somewhat underestimated his junior brother. Although Strange opened the other side of the teleportation gate in the air of the mirror dimension space, he didn't have the intention to kill the three vampires. When half of the three vampires' bodies fell into the teleportation gate, Strange didn't hesitate at all. His right hand suddenly pulled, as if he was pulling a non-existent pocket, and the teleportation gate with a diameter of several meters instantly shrank and disappeared. Bright red blood splashed everywhere, and the three vampires who fell into the teleportation gate seemed to have been cut in half at the waist. Their upper body and lower body were instantly separated. To a certain extent, what Strange did was indeed similar to being cut in half at the waist. However, the tool he used to cut in half at the waist wasn't an ordinary weapon, but the omnipresent and incomparably powerful spatial force. Using the formidable power of the spatial restoration gate, Strange easily completed the purpose of cutting in half at the waist. Being instantly cut in half at the waist, whether for humans or vampires, was a heavy blow that their lives couldn't bear. The only difference was that after humans suffered such a heavy blow, it wouldn't take long for them to report to the Grim Reaper. Vampires, on the other hand, could hold on a little longer. Vampires were born with a powerful regenerative ability, but at this time, not only could it not heal their injuries, but it also became the source of their pain, greatly prolonging their suffering time. Well done. Although Strange's teleportation gate cutting in half at the waist was not amazing, considering that this was his first battle, and that he faced three vampires at once, his performance could be regarded as excellent. When Strange severely injured the three vampires, Rog, who was sitting on the edge of the roof and watching the show, used flight to fly to Strange's side and patted him on the shoulder with gratification. Well done. However, you have to remove the roots when cutting weeds. Letting them die as soon as possible is also a kind of mercy. As soon as his voice fell, Rog raised his right hand and summoned three small clusters of hellfire on his index, middle, and ring fingers. He casually waved his hand, and these three clusters of hellfire, which were only the size of a fingertip, flew like bullets towards the three vampires who were howling in pain on the ground. The moment the hellfire touched the three vampires who only had their upper body left turned into ashes in the blink of an eye, completely disappearing. Chapter 606. Where are we going next? After Rog finished destroying the corpse, Strange lifted the mirror space that enveloped the entire block and turned to Rog and asked, "Keep flying forward and you will meet your second opponent." Rog sensed a little and gave Strange a new direction. Okay. With that, Strange took the lead and flew forward. The battle just now didn't consume much of his energy. And after officially completing his first battle, he had an idea to test the limits of his current strength. Although he didn't say this idea out loud, Rog saw his plan at a glance. Rog also had this idea in the past, and what he did was even more excessive than what Strange did. Rog remembered that at that time, he went directly to a Russian mafia and broke into the mafia's headquarters with a knife, rescued the kidnapped hostages, and then accepted the mafia's property. That commission didn't get much ninja coins, but it opened the idea of increasing his side business. It was also from that day on that he began to gradually develop the habit of never failing to act. Under the bright moonlight, Rog and Strange flew quickly through the air like two ghosts, flying towards the fourth unlucky vampire. Although he was Strange-skied at this time, in fact, this late-night hunting plan was entirely Strange's own idea. According to his explanation, he would first use these low-level vampires to improve his combat experience, and while attracting the attention of the vampires, he would eliminate the vampires in New York little by little. As long as he can maintain a stable elimination efficiency, then the high-level vampires in New York will focus on him. At that time, he can get rid of the person in charge of the vampires in New York and finally eliminate all the vampires in New York. Generally speaking, there is no problem with his plan. The only uncertainty at present is what kind of strength the vampire in charge of New York has. However, because his current guide is Rog, he can basically ignore this. Even if the vampire in charge of New York is the legendary vampire ancestor Kane, Rog has absolute confidence in protecting Strange. If he wants to kill Strange in front of him, even if Ancient One does it himself, he may not be able to do it. This has nothing to do with whether he can beat Ancient One or not. It's purely because New York used to be his home ground. Although his main residence has now moved to Washington, there are still hundreds of Flying Thor techniques left behind by him in New York. New York is his Flying Thor home ground. After flying for more than 10 minutes, Rog and Strange met their second target of the night as they wished. To be precise, it was the second vampire. He was different from the 3 newborn vampires. Although the one in front of them was also a newborn vampire who had just transformed from a human into a vampire, the power of his blood was stronger than the previous 3 combined. Just by looking at the power of his blood, this newborn vampire had already reached the point where he was about to become a noble. Noble, Marquis, Count, Noble. This was not only the division of strength among the vampires, but also a reflection of their status. When the vampires still abided by the precepts of seclusion, any vampire can get a title that belongs to them. The only difference is that some vampires advance faster, while some vampires can only rely on their long lives to accumulate experience to improve their title little by little. Brandy Johnson is very satisfied with his current life, or to be precise, he is very satisfied with his life after becoming a vampire. After the vampires appeared in the human world, Brandy Johnson realized that this was an opportunity to completely change his life. While most people were still wary of the legendary blood breeds, he did everything he could to find a blood breed in New York. He, who had taken the initiative to approach them, had almost become the vampire's food. However, after he groveled and expressed his admiration and yearning for the great blood tribe, he obtained the opportunity to receive the embrace from this blood tribe. To some extent, he can even be regarded as the first human in New York to take the initiative to embrace the vampire. Although it was shameful to give up the identity of a human, his sacrifice allowed him to see the hope of changing his life. After accepting the embrace and becoming a blood breed, he displayed an extremely high talent. In just a few months, he grew from the lowest level of vampire to only 1 step away from becoming a baron. Even his father, who gave him the embrace, was shocked by the talent he displayed. As long as he maintained his current hunting and feeding efficiency, it would take him at most half a month to raise the blood power in his body to the point where he could be promoted to a baron. He would become a true noble vampire with a title and be recognized by the clan. Yes, as long as a vampire had a title, he would be recognized by the clan. He would not be seen as a servant or slave. Before he became a vampire, Brandy Johnson had been a young man who had a bright future ahead of him. However, real life taught him a lesson time and time again. If you didn't have a prominent background, if you didn't have the absolute talent to look down on others, if you didn't have the support of a superior, then, no matter how hard you try, you will never be able to break those invisible, intangible, but real, unspoken rules. Brandy Johnson also fantasized about using hard work to change his not-so-outstanding background and family background. Unfortunately, in a capitalist society where money was paramount, the harder he worked, the faster his boss could get the latest Ferrari. Not to mention the fact that his credit had been stolen by his flatterer colleague, and that his longtime girlfriend had thrown herself at his sports car driving friend, and a series of melodramatic but real events, he was in despair. However, just as he was considering whether to take the initiative to end his clown-like life, the vampire appeared. Although a few months had passed, he still couldn't forget the scene when he became a vampire. His fat boss and flattering colleague knelt in front of him and begged for mercy. He also couldn't forget the fear and regret on his ex-girlfriend's face when he sucked her blood dry. Of course, he also couldn't forget the scene of the sports car friend who he once regarded as a confidant, but who appeared on his girlfriend's bed, crying in pain when he broke all 4 of his limbs. That cry was extraordinarily pleasant to hear. Thinking of this, a morbid smile appeared on Brandy Johnson's face. Chapter 607. Be careful. The opponent's strength is stronger than the previous 3 blood breeds combined. Roger said to Strange as soon as he arrived at Brandy Johnson's location. Okay, I got it. Strange frowned and looked at Brandy, who was sitting on the rooftop, and replied in a serious tone. Brandy Johnson, who was sitting on the rooftop, suddenly raised his head and looked in their direction. Just as he was about to cast a spatial mirror spell to land in front of his target, Brandy Johnson suddenly raised his head and looked in their direction. Good hearing. Rog wasn't surprised that Brandy Johnson was able to discover his and Strange's arrival in advance. Any vampire with a noble title possessed senses that were far sharper than ordinary people. When Brandy Johnson raised his head, Strange was stunned for a moment. His hands maintained the gesture of the mirror dimension as he floated in the air. This, Strange, who lacked enough experience, didn't know whether to continue landing or not. Just as Strange was considering if he should rethink his strategy, Brandy Johnson suddenly stood up and looked at Logue, who was floating in the air in disbelief. Fourth Hokage? Why is he here? Although Brandy Johnson hasn't been officially recognized by the clan, he already heard about the grudge between Rog and the vampires from his father who gave him the embrace. How is this possible? Why would the 4th Hokage specifically come to find me, a little vampire? Brandy's face was covered in cold sweat. There were many vampires who knew about the grudge between Rog and the vampires, but there weren't many who really cared about this news. Even some of the less intelligent vampires, after hearing this news, had a crazy idea to fight with Konoha. But these vampires didn't have time to carry out this crazy idea, as they were killed by their father. If it's not necessary, don't provoke Konoha. Especially Rog, the 4th Hokage of Konoha. Although this wasn't an official order, those vampires who dared to violate it didn't live to see the moon the next day. After confirming that the person floating in the air was Rog, Brandy Johnson didn't hesitate and turned to run. Rog sighed helplessly as he looked at Brandy, who was running away like a frightened stray dog. Although he didn't know how the vampires trained the vampires, from Brandy's actions, they obviously reminded the vampires to pay special attention to some things. What do we do now? Strange dispelled the spatial mirror spell that he had yet to cast and flew back to Rog. Follow him, maybe I can have some extra relaxing activities tonight. After saying that, Rog took the lead and flew toward Brandy. Brandy's running speed was far faster than ordinary people, and the escape route. But in front of Rog, who has the ability to fly and chakra, his escape was declared a failure. Rog and Strange followed behind him, like 2 hunters stalking their prey. How could this be? Could it be that they found out that I tortured and killed my ex-girlfriend and friends? Didn't they say that as long as I don't provoke Konoha, Konoha's people won't come? Brandy, who was running frantically, thought about the possibilities in his mind. But he would never have thought that the reason why he met Rog tonight was purely a coincidence. After flying for nearly half an hour behind the running Brandy, Rog and Strange came to an abandoned factory. In order to prevent Brandy from noticing that he was following them, Rog even cast a group invisibility spell on himself and Strange to conceal their figures. Under the gaze of the 2 of them, Brandy Johnson carefully walked into the factory that had been abandoned for a long time. When entering the factory, Brandy didn't forget to look up and look around to make sure that Rog didn't follow. When Brandy's figure disappeared behind the back door of the factory, Rog stopped Strange, who was about to land on the roof of the factory. There are a lot of vampires in there, and some of them have titles. After going in, your target is still the guy who ran away just now. As for the rest, I'll take care of it. Although there were a lot of vampires in the factory, for Rog, there was no difference between one vampire and a group of vampires. Even if there were 8 vampire dukes in the factory, he had absolute confidence in dealing with them. But Strange had no objection to Rog's arrangement. It was only after experiencing a real battle that he began to realize just how powerful Logue was. That's the power of a single person against a country and a race. When Rog landed at the gate of the factory, Strange controlled the floating cloak to slowly land behind him and immediately cast Light of Magic, condensing a shining golden magic whip in his hands. Don't be so nervous. The strongest vampire inside is only a viscount. Rog glanced at Strange, then walked into the abandoned factory without any lights as if he was taking a stroll after a meal. Generally speaking, vampires usually gathered in private manors or five-star hotels and other high-class places. However, not every member of the Blood Clan had the financial resources to maintain their so-called nobility. Living for a long time didn't mean that one would have a lot of wealth. Even among the vampires with titles, there were many who couldn't take out millions of USD. Wait a moment, I'll use the magic you know to deal with these guys. If you're interested, you can learn a little. But my fighting style might not be suitable for you, so you don't have to bite the bullet and learn it. Just observe it. Strange only had 5 spells at his disposal, and only 4 of them could be used in battle. Although the out-of-body magic wasn't absolutely impossible to deal with enemies, the timing to cast it was rather harsh, and it wasn't suitable to be used as a regular combat method. Okay. Strange answered silently, still maintaining the magic whip in his hands. Then I'll teach you the first lesson now. In a dark environment, you need to avoid exposing your position as much as possible. After saying that, Rog pointed at the magic whip in Strange's hand that was constantly emitting golden light. After hearing Rog's reminder, Strange froze for a moment, then removed the magic whip in his hand. Without the light emitted by the magic whip, the surrounding environment instantly dimmed. The second lesson, distance is the key to determining the outcome of a battle. If the enemy is far away from you, then what you need to do is to find a way to close the distance between you. Chapter 608. Distance. Strange repeated, and then nodded, indicating that he understood. Although he already gave a reply, Rog felt that he still didn't understand. Since this was the case, then he would use an actual case to prove it. Rog put on the ring and began to cast a portal in front of Strange. Unlike the previous portals, the portal he opened this time wasn't big, only a few dozen centimeters in diameter. What was even more unusual was that the portal he cast this time was extremely fast. In less than a second, he opened up a portal above his right hand. Looking at this unreasonably small portal, a puzzled look appeared on Strange's face. However, he soon understood Rog's plan. Almost at the moment when the portal was formed, a vampire standing in a corner of the factory fell into the portal that suddenly opened under his feet. *CK. The vampire didn't realize what happened and fell into the portal as if he fell into a lake. The entrance of the portal was set by Rog at the feet of the unlucky vampire. And above his right hand was naturally the exit. When the unlucky vampire fell from the portal that was only a few dozen centimeters in diameter, Rog stretched out his right hand and grabbed the vampire's neck. Then, his right hand suddenly exerted force. Crack! The crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. This vampire with amazing recovery ability didn't even have time to see Rog's face before his neck was broken. If this was a vampire with a noble title, then even if his neck was broken, he wouldn't die on the spot. The power of blood in his body was enough to repair the wound on his neck. Unfortunately, this vampire was just a newborn vampire, and the power of blood in his body was so weak that it was almost negligible. This is actually similar to the 3 vampires you used the portal to cut in half. The key is that the casting speed is fast enough, so fast that the target can't react in time. Your casting speed is not bad. Without increasing your casting speed, reducing the size of the portal can effectively reduce the time it takes to form. After throwing away the lifeless vampire in his hand like garbage, Rog turned his head and explained to Strange. Strange is someone who will become a supreme mage in the future. His magic talent is far above Rog's. But when it comes to killing, Rog is at least several levels higher than him. Although the vampire whose neck was broken by Rog was just a newborn vampire, Strange was still shocked by Rog's understatement. For some reason, in his view, the scene of Rog killing the vampire just now had an indescribable casual and natural flow, as if it was drinking water and eating. Is this the difference between a professional and a non-professional? Strange couldn't help but think. The use of the portal is far more than what the book said. If you're interested, you can study it yourself, Rog said as he walked inside the factory. At the same time, he was thinking about the next guidance. Very quickly, he came up with the next subject for Strange's guidance. I see that you're quite familiar with the magic light. Then I'll tell you some of the combat essentials of this magic. Rog, who was walking slowly, suddenly stopped and turned his head to Strange. Look carefully, don't blink. As soon as his voice fell, Rog once again cast the portal magic. The blood breeds in the factory immediately reacted when the blood breeds suddenly fell into the portal beneath their feet and disappeared. While Rog was explaining to Strange, these vampires showed their innate speed and agility and quickly changed their position. But in front of Rog's chakra perception, their stealth movements were meaningless. In the blink of an eye, another portal with a diameter of tens of centimeters was formed and appeared under the feet of a vampire. In the next second, this unlucky guy fell from the portal in front of Rog. Light of magic, blade form. The moment this vampire was about to land, Rog's right hand swung out like lightning. Under Strange's gaze, a golden magic blade instantly appeared in Rog's right hand. Then, with lightning speed, it slashed across the vampire's neck. One slash, decapitated. When the golden radiance slashed across the vampire's neck, the magic blade instantly disappeared. This vampire's head was thrown high into the air and fell heavily to the ground. Rog said slowly, light of magic can be condensed into various forms of weapons. For example, I prefer to condense it into the form of a katana that is convenient for slashing. Simply put, this is a magic that uses magic to condense a physical weapon. It doesn't matter what form the weapon is condensed into. The important thing is to not let the enemy prepare in advance, and the speed of the attack has to be fast. You like long whips, that's not a problem, but you'd better not let the enemy know in advance. Otherwise, they can make corresponding preparations in advance, such as quickly approaching you to avoid the whip's most effective attack range. Know what form of weapon can exert the greatest power at what distance, and can quickly change according to the actual situation. This way, this magic can exert the greatest power. Rog patiently explained, fearing that Strange didn't understand something. In fact, this kind of thing could be understood by Strange in future battles. But since he accepted the task of guiding Strange, he would naturally do his best to help his junior grow up. Understood. Although Rog was a mage taught by Kamarj, Strange found that Rog's understanding of light of magic was completely different from his. In Rog's eyes, light of magic was a close-range weapon arsenal. And he found that no matter what kind of magic Rog used, he would try to pursue the instant effect as much as possible. In this regard, he was completely different from Kamartaj's fighting instructors. Not only did Kamartaj's mages like glittering magic, but they would also deliberately maintain the golden effect, as if they were afraid that others couldn't see it. But Rog was completely different. He seemed to hate these golden effects. There's nothing much to teach about mirror dimension. It's just a matter of the size and casting speed. You can slowly study this by yourself and strive to achieve instant effect. A spell that could be cast instantaneously was a good spell suitable for battle. Chapter 609. Whether it was magic or ninjutsu, Rog pursued instant casting as much as possible. Although ninja was a melee profession, he had the heart to become a magic cannon. Because of the gift of Muji, he could basically cast ninjutsu instantaneously. As long as the amount of chakra could keep up, he could transform into a ruthless ninjutsu machine. However, magic was slightly different. Although his casting speed was faster than many professional mages, it still didn't reach the perfect state in his mind. But he didn't spend too much time and energy to improve his casting speed. After all, his profession was a ninja, not a mage. Okay, I got it. To a certain extent, Strange was also an out-and-out genius. However, compared to those who were arrogant and unruly just because they had some talent, he could be considered as a person who always maintained a humble attitude. There are 10 vampires here. Except for the one who escaped from the rooftop, leave the rest to me. Go to the left, you should be able to meet the guy who escaped. After that, Rog raised his right hand and motioned to Strange, indicating that he should go to the factory alone. If he wanted to know if the guidance was effective, he would let him fight. This was like a teacher who liked to test the student's learning progress by assigning homework. Although Rog wasn't Strange's teacher, he also wanted to see how much his little brother had learned. After seeing Rog's signal, Strange nodded silently and walked straight into the dark factory. When Strange's figure disappeared into the left entrance, Rog stretched his neck, then summoned the silver Kusanagi sword, and hummed a little tune as he walked to the right. Although there were several vampires with titles in the factory, Rog wasn't particularly worried about Strange's safety. Not to mention that Strange had a certain ability to protect himself. The new artifact he just got today was enough to ensure that he wouldn't be instantly assassinated by the vampires. The hovering cloak was no ordinary magic item. If one were to evaluate it in terms of grade, it would be a genuine ancient divine artifact. Aside from flying and cooperating with its owner in battle, the hovering cloak also had powerful defensive capabilities. It could withstand most physical and magical attacks. In addition, it also had the ability to transform and shrink or extend at will. It could transform into normal clothes, such as a suit. If it weren't for the fact that the hovering cloak didn't approve of him, Strange wouldn't have gotten the chance to own this self-aware ancient divine artifact. Rog didn't tell Strange that Brandy Johnson wasn't the only one on the left side of the factory. There were also 3 blood breeds who were stronger than Brandy Johnson. 1 Viscount and 2 Barons. The 3 strongest blood breeds in the factory were now with Brandy Johnson. Rog deliberately concealed this point because he wanted to see how Strange would deal with this sudden situation. Although Ancient One asked him to guide Strange, he did not ask him to be Strange's nanny. If Strange couldn't even deal with these little blood breeds, then he wasn't qualified to be the supreme sorcerer, and he wasn't qualified to take the time stone from Ancient One. After entering the dark and turbid passage, Rog stopped and cast a ninjutsu that he rarely used. Ninjutsu, mist concealment technique. As the chakra in his body began to flow, a thick mist quickly surged in the dark passage. As time passed, the mist became thicker and spread out along the passage. When the thick mist seriously blocked the line of sight, Rog walked forward again. This time, he didn't hum a tune, didn't make any sound, and even the sound of his footsteps seemed to have completely disappeared. Who did that guy Brandy meet outside? I've never seen him so flustered. Who knows, I've never liked him. Didn't he just receive the embrace earlier than us? What's there to be arrogant about? Do you think he met someone from the Avengers? Wasn't the Avengers taught a lesson by the ancestors some time ago? Maybe he met those street vigilantes. The street vigilantes that these blood breeds spoke of were the vigilantes represented by Daredevil. Strictly speaking, Gwen was actually a vigilante. Although she had the strength to become a superhero, because she didn't participate in any major crisis, she wasn't a real superhero. While these vampires were whispering to each other, Logue, who was using a different kind of silent killing technique, silently appeared behind them and watched them complain about Brandy Johnson. Mist, silent killing technique. This was the famous move of the Mist Ninja Zabuza, who was known as the Ghost Man chakra hit the whole body, and the purple chakra flow burst out like a ghost, and then through the fog produced by the mist concealment technique, he hid his tracks and moved at high speed to assassinate the enemy in the fog. If he was in a good mood, he could also appear at the last moment for an ultimate kill. However, this assassination method belonged to Zabuza's silent killing technique, not Rog's silent killing technique. Rog borrowed some ideas from Zabuza's silent killing technique and made some improvements. For example, the effect of stealth in the fog was enhanced, and the high-speed movement assassination was adjusted to silent movement assassination. Of course, if necessary, he could also switch silent movement to high-speed movement. But in this way, the effect of silent approach would be significantly weakened. Is it foggy? Because of the dim light, These blood breeds who complained about Brandy Johnson only now discovered the thick fog that had already shrouded them. How can there be fog here? This is tea. Before the vampire finished speaking, Rog, who had appeared behind them for a long time, waved the Kusanagi sword in his hand. The head that flew high and the blood that burst out suddenly awakened the group of vampires, and they fled in all directions like frightened birds. However, they had just taken a few steps when they saw a silver arc flash in the fog. Another vampire had been beheaded. In less than a few seconds, 2 vampires were beheaded. But what shocked them even more was that they didn't see the attacker's appearance until now. Not to mention who the attacker was, they didn't even see where the attack came from. Just as the 4 surviving vampires gathered back to back in fear and looked around for the attacker, a silver-white arc once again streaked across the thick fog. Chapter 610. Another head was thrown high into the air, accompanied by fresh blood. The silver-white light flashed, and another vampire's life was taken away. Under Rog's silent killing technique, the remaining 3 vampires felt an indescribable pressure. Since they abandoned their human identity and became vampires, it was the first time they felt this kind of fear of death that made their bodies tremble uncontrollably. What the hell is going on? Although they wanted to know the answer, unfortunately, they were destined to go to hell with this question. For these former humans, who took the initiative to throw themselves into the arms of the vampires, Rog had no intention of holding back. He was not interested in knowing why these people chose to become vampires, but he despised this kind of inhumane approach. Human beings do have a lot of shortcomings, but no matter how many shortcomings there are, it is not a reason to give up their human identity. With Rog's strength, he can quickly kill these vampires in a short time. But he didn't do so, but deliberately slowed down his speed, a little bit prolonging the fear of these vampires. Under the great pressure of death, these vampires could no longer maintain their calm, and began to panic and run away. However, their efforts were doomed to be in vain. When improving the silent killing technique, Rog didn't forget to make some adjustments to the fog concealment technique. It's a bit of a waste to just block the enemy's line of sight through the fog. In order to make the fog play a greater role, he also deliberately covered the fog with some chakra. Although these chakra attached to the fog won't directly hurt the target in the fog, it can be used as a contact medium for other attacks. For example, genjutsu that can cause great damage to the mind. Genjutsu, Hell's View technique. Rog didn't stop these vampires from escaping, nor did he use his most commonly used Sharingan genjutsu, but he used an ordinary genjutsu that is not difficult. Compared with the strange Sharingan genjutsu, the effect of Hell's View technique is much simpler. Hell's View technique can make the opponent see the horror in their heart that they don't want to see. As for what the opponent will see, even Rog himself doesn't know. To put it simply, the view of hell was to draw out the most fearful scene in the opponent's heart and use the fear in the opponent's heart to defeat the opponent. This was similar to the so-called, "I'll kill myself." A few seconds after Rog performed the Sea of Hell technique, the 3 vampires screamed miserably in the thick fog. Rog didn't know what they saw, but judging from their screams, the illusion in front of them must be very exciting. After determining the location of the 3 vampires through the screams, Rog walked towards them with the Kusanagi sword in his hand. 1, 2, 3. After using the Kusanagi sword to kill the 3 vampires, Rog deactivated the mist concealment technique and walked to the other side of the factory. At this time, Strange, who was on the left side of the factory, was facing the most difficult battle in his life. According to Rog's instructions, he walked into the passage on the left side of the factory, and then at the end of the passage he saw Brandy Johnson running away. However, Brandy Johnson wasn't the only vampire that appeared in front of him. After seeing the 3 vampires beside Brandy Johnson, Strange immediately reacted. Rog definitely did it on purpose. Although Strange didn't know what kind of perception Rog had, he was 100% sure that the dignified Yondaime Hokage would never make such a serious misjudgment. Since it wasn't a misjudgment, then the only possibility left is that Rog did it on purpose. Although there were more enemies in front of him than he had imagined, and their strength was also stronger than he had expected, Strange still maintained the calmness he should have and didn't reveal any fear or panic. When Brandy Johnson and the others were charging towards him like lightning, Strange decisively cast a spell. Portal. Just when Brandy Johnson and the others were about to rush in front of him like a pack of wolves hunting their prey, Strange opened a portal less than a meter in diameter under his feet and let himself fall into the portal. Strange didn't have the intention to escape. Falling into the portal, he fell from the ceiling behind Brandy Johnson and the others. At the same time, he was ready to cast mirror dimension magic. Although Brandy Johnson and the others' first siege failed, they quickly adjusted their posture and once again attacked Strange, who was floating in the office. Mirror dimension. When Brandy Johnson's sharp nails were about to touch him, Strange pushed out the mirror dimension magic that he had already prepared. In the next second, the space between them seemed to fold like broken glass. Brandy Johnson didn't have time to react, and under the influence of inertia, he rushed into the mirror dimension magic. After trapping Brandy Johnson in the mirror dimension magic, Strange's hands danced again. The magic whip shining with golden light instantly formed and fiercely lashed at the remaining 3 vampires. First, trap Brandy Johnson, then attack the rest of the enemies. Strange's tactic wasn't wrong, but he neglected a small problem. Brandy Johnson, who was trapped by him, was the weakest vampire present. Just when the golden magic whip was about to hit the vampire in front of him, the vampire, who looked to be in his 30s, revealed a mysterious smile. Then he instantly disappeared from Strange's sight. Shadow Leap. Why was it that only with a noble title could one be truly recognized by the clan? The reason was simple. Because only with a noble title could one truly learn the unique dark magic of the blood breeds. Using the power of shadows, the vampire who was supposed to be hit by the magic whip easily dodged Strange's attack and appeared behind him in a flash. Corrosive Claw. The right claw with strong corrosive power fiercely attacked Strange's back. However, just when the right claw emitting traces of green light was about to hit Strange's back, the floating cloak automatically took the initiative to meet the claw-like right hand. The corrosive claw touched the floating cloak, and then, nothing happened. How was this possible? Chapter 611. A cloak that doesn't take the initiative to help its owner block attacks is not a good cloak. The hovering cloak proved with its actions what an excellent cloak is. When the hovering cloak took the initiative to wrap around the vampire behind Strange, Strange once again waved the magic whip in his hand and swung it at the other 2 vampires. Pa. Although Strange was a neurosurgeon before becoming a mage, it has to be said that his whip skills are very good. The only thing he wasn't sure about was whether he learned this whip technique from Kamartaj's fighting teacher or from some special professions. The magic whip in Strange's hand danced in the air, and the remaining 2 vampires were unable to get close to him. When Strange resisted the attacks of the 2 vampires by himself, Rog, who had already cleaned up the small fries, quietly came near him. However, he didn't participate in the battle, but like a spectator, he admired Strange's heroic figure. No one present, including Strange, noticed his arrival. Relying on the hovering cloak and the magic whip, Strange temporarily resisted the siege of these 3 vampires. But as time passed, especially when these vampires began to cast magic, the pressure on him increased. Strange does have outstanding magic talent, but it can't be denied that he is still a novice mage who only knows 5 spells. The lack of magic caused him to lack sufficient means to deal with and attack. If it weren't for Rog's tutoring just now, which slightly broadened his battle thinking, he wouldn't have been able to hold on under the siege of these 3 vampires. Looking at Strange, who was constantly using teleportation magic to teleport, Rog, who had been watching the battle for a while, made his move. Fire release, great fireball. Rog, who was near the passage, took a deep breath and then spat out a huge fireball with a diameter of several meters. The astonishing orange-red fireball flew like a cannonball towards the vampire in front of Strange. Boom! A huge explosion sounded, and the exploding sparks dispelled the surrounding darkness. When Rog just spat out the great fireball, Strange opened a small portal under his feet. Although it was the first time he saw the great fireball, his intuition told him that this astonishing fireball was very dangerous. Strange wasn't the only one who had this premonition. The vampires who were fighting with him also had the same idea. Strange could escape the attack range of the great fireball through the portal, but the remaining 2 vampires were not so lucky. Although in Naruto's world, fire release has the title of Undying Technique. However, that also depended on who was using the fire escape technique. Some people cast fire release is still very terrifying. For example, Uchiha Madara or Rogue. After the great fireball exploded, Rogue didn't look at the 2 vampires and used the body flicker technique to come to Strange's side, who had just walked out of the portal, and slowly said, "I'll take care of the rest, you go to the mirror dimension space and deal with the guy who escaped." Although Rogue came after the battle, as long as he took a look at the mirror dimension space entrance in midair, he could know what Strange had done before. After watching the battle for a while, he also roughly figured out the extent of Strange's current mastery. Whether or not Strange could take care of these vampires on his own wasn't the main point. The main point was whether or not he understood Logue's instructions. "You can tell me in advance next time. I don't mind you using actual combat to test my learning progress. But I don't like the feeling of being hidden," Strange complained. "In a real battle, no one will provide you with information in advance, so be content." As soon as his voice fell, Rogue disappeared in front of Strange. "It's time for tonight's operation to end." After Rogue disappeared, Strange summoned back the hovering cloak that tied up the other vampire. He put on the cloak and flew towards the entrance of the mirror dimension in midair. More than 10 minutes later, Rogue and Strange left the abandoned factory and flew in the direction of the New York Sanctum. In terms of the results of the operation, tonight was a good hunting operation. After tonight's battle, Strange was no longer the rookie sorcerer who only had theory and no practical experience. And Rogue also completed his guidance task. In the following time, he only needs to protect Strange's safety and prevent the future Supreme Sorcerer from being killed by vampires. As for the rest, it's Strange's own business. After returning to the New York Sanctum, Rogue greeted the king who was guarding the sanctum. He then went to the study in the sanctum, picked up a magic book, and started reading. Although the collection of books in the New York Sanctum is not as good as Camartage, there are many unique books here that Camartage does not have. When Rogue spent the rest of the night in the study, Strange returned to his room without saying a word, digesting the harvest of tonight. For Strange, tonight was definitely a memorable night. Nothing happened all night. When the sun rose the next day, Rogue left the New York Sanctum alone and opened the portal to return to Konoha headquarters in Washington. Although he promised Ancient One to guide Strange for a period of time and protect Strange's life and safety. But this doesn't mean that he will drop everything and stay with Strange all day. It's daytime, it's vampires' sleeping time, and Strange is now in the New York Sanctum, so he doesn't need to worry about vampires' revenge. After enjoying an exquisite breakfast at Konoha headquarters, he came to the private training room located underground. The sage body from Hashirama has been completely developed, and the eye power of Manjikyu Sharingan has long been raised to the limit, so the next thing to do is, of course, to upgrade Manjikyu Sharingan to Rinnegan. Rinnegan, the ultimate dojutsu derived from the fruit of the god tree chakra, is known as the eye that controls life and death. The power of Rinnegan is beyond doubt, but similarly, the conditions for opening it are also extremely harsh. Under normal circumstances, only Indra's chakra reincarnation can open it after transplanting the body or cells of Ajura chakra reincarnation. Simply put, it is necessary to have eternal Manjikyu Sharingan and Hashirama cells. Rogue doesn't have eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, but he has the same sage body as Hashirama. So as long as he finds the right way, he may be able to open Rinnegan. As for what is the right way, Rogue already has a general idea. Chapter 612. Uchiha Madara has given enough advice on how to open Rinnegan. Although after he obtained Hashirama's cells, it took him a long time to awaken the Rinnegan before he died. But his experience can still be used for reference. And unlike him, Roger now has a guarantee that he can open the Rinnegan with 100% success rate. The Chakra Fruit of the God Tree. As long as 3 months pass, the God Tree on Igo will be completely mature. Even if his current attempt fails, he can still open Rinnegan after 3 months. So even if he fails now, he has nothing to worry about, he just needs to make sure that he doesn't kill himself. After coming to the private training room located in the basement of Konoha's headquarters building, Rog stretched his limbs. Then he opened the Hashimen Tanku. Moreover, he directly opened the 7th gate of the Hashimen Tanku. Hashimen Tanku, 7th gate of wonder, open. In an instant, a large amount of blue steam was emitted from his body, and the already amazing amount of chakra instantly skyrocketed. Although this sudden burst of blue steam is similar to the chakra coat he usually uses, it has nothing to do with chakra. This blue steam is the evaporation of sweat when the body is overloaded. As for why it is blue after evaporation, Rog doesn't know the specific reason. Anyway, the Hashimen Tanku is set up like this. The method he intends to use to forcibly open Rinnegan is simple, but also difficult. In short, it is to overload the fully developed Sannin body, and then use the chakra enhancement brought by the Hashimen Tanku to forcibly stimulate his Mangekyo Sharingan. With the super recovery brought by the Sannin body, Rog doesn't need to worry about the sequelae of opening the 7th gate of wonder. Moreover, in this state of overloading the body, his Mangekyo Sharingan will also be stimulated to the limit. The opening of Rinnegan, in the final analysis, is the reappearance of the power of the Otsutsuki clan. Rikudo Sannin inherited the power of Otsutsuki Kagaya, so he was born with Rinnegan. The so-called Indra Chakra and Ajura Chakra were just a part of the Sage of the Six Paths power. Therefore, Rog intends to directly skip the link of Indra and Ajura Chakra. With the help of the chakra buff brought by the Hashimen Tanku, and the power of his Sage body and Mangekyo Sharingan, he will touch the level of the Sage of Six Paths. This kind of potential squeezing that was similar to seed explosion definitely had some risks. However, Rog had calculated that the risk was completely within the acceptable range. It's totally worth it to open Rinnegan 3 months in advance. After opening the 7th gate of wonder, his body had been strengthened to an unimaginable level. Right now, even if he were to compete with Hulk in terms of strength, he still had absolute confidence that he would have the upper hand. The 8 inner hidden gates was a body technique that was used to risk one's life in battle, but now he was using it as an auxiliary move. Of all the users of the 8 inner hidden gates, he was the only one who dared to do such a thing. Although the practice was a bit crazy, the benefits it brought were obvious. Under the stimulation of the sage body and the massive amount of chakra, his Mangekyo Sharingan began to spin wildly, and the color began to fade. It actually worked? After noticing that the lines on his Mangekyo Sharingan were spinning wildly uncontrollably, Rog froze for a moment. However, he quickly calmed down and controlled the surging chakra in his body to flow into his eyes. Strictly speaking, his way of opening Rinnegan was not fundamentally different from Uchiha Madara's. The only difference was that Uchiha Madara chose to use a lot of time to open it bit by bit. Rog, on the other hand, chose to squeeze out his own potential to open it quickly. Both methods had their advantages and disadvantages. Uchiha Madara's method was more stable, except that it took a lot of time, there was no risk. Rog's method was much more radical. Not only would it overload the body, but there was also a certain risk of losing control. This was why he deliberately came to the private practice room to do this instead of trying it in the New York temple. After losing control, destroying his Konoha headquarters was not a big problem for him. It was nothing more than spending some money to rebuild it. But if he destroyed the New York temple, he would not be able to explain it to Ancient One. As time passed, the lines in his eyes turned faster and faster, and began to develop into concentric circles. At the same time, the bright red color was getting lighter and lighter, gradually showing a trace of lavender. Judging from the mutation of the Mangekyo Sharingan at this time, the progress was smooth. But Rog couldn't relax at all. Even if the amount of chakra he had now surpassed that of Hashirama, the chakra in his body was gradually unable to keep up with the consumption. Do I have to open the 8th gate of death? This idea involuntarily emerged in Rog's mind. But he quickly gave up this crazy idea. Trying to open the Rinnegan didn't need to go to such a point. After thinking for a few seconds, he quickly made a decision. Give up opening both eyes at the same time and open one of them first. He decisively stopped the chakra rushing to the left eye of the Mangekyo and used all the chakra in his body to stimulate the right eye. Without the continuous stimulation of chakra, his left eye quickly returned to its normal appearance and changed back to the bright red form. At the same time, the color of his right eye was getting lighter and lighter. When the chakra in his body was about to reach the lowest warning line of life-threatening, the chakra in his body suddenly calmed down. The right eye, which had just madly devoured his chakra like a black hole, finally stopped and no longer consumed his chakra madly. Did he really succeed? Although he couldn't see what his right eye looked like at this time, Rog could be sure that he really succeeded. When he fought against Thanos on Titan, he used the reality gem to temporarily evolve himself into a Rinnegan. And at that time, he also had the right eye of Rinnegan. There's no mistake, this is the feeling. He slowly raised his right hand and pointed his palm at the steel door of the practice room. 10,000 Mammoth Tensei. With a thought, a terrifying gravitational force poured out of his palm and directly acted on the steel door more than 10 meters away. Boom! The steel door that was enough to withstand the bombardment of rockets was pulled out and quickly flew towards Rog under the effect of 10,000 Mammoth Tensei. When the steel door, which was nearly 10 centimeters long, came in front of him, he gently waved his right hand and threw the steel door flying at high speed to the side. This is the feeling. Rog lifted the seventh gate of wonder and smiled with satisfaction. Chapter 613. However, his smile only lasted for less than a second before it disappeared. After the seventh gate of wonder was lifted, an indescribable feeling of exhaustion flooded his body, almost making him unable to maintain a standing posture. Although he has the sage body, the Hashimantanku is a physical technique that consumes a lot of energy. After standing motionless for a few seconds, he controlled the little chakra left in his body and returned the flying thunder god to his room. Then he went to the sofa in the living room and lay down regardless of his image. While lying on the sofa to recover his strength, he began to recall the relevant information about Shinra Tensei and Chibaku Tensei in his mind. After awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, it will take the initiative to awaken the dojutsu that suits it. The Rinnegan also has similar characteristics. However, unlike the Mangekyo Sharingan that can only awaken one dojutsu, the awakening ability of the Rinnegan is not limited to a single eye. One Rinnegan or two Rinnegan can awaken 3 universal abilities. Shinra Tensei symbolizes repulsion, Wansho Tensei symbolizes gravity, and Chibaku Tensei symbolizes the ultimate control of gravity. At this time, although Rog only opened one Rinnegan, and it hasn't been long since he opened it, but at the moment when the Rinnegan opened, he knew that at this time, he can already skillfully use the 3 Rinnegan ninjutsu. This was different from when he was on Titan Star, where he had to rely on the power of the Gem of Reality to cast it. After all, the Rinnegan he had at that time was just a fake Rinnegan made by the Gem of Reality. After lying on the sofa with his eyes closed for more than 10 minutes, he slowly got up and walked to the bathroom. Opening the 7th gate of wonder made him sweat a lot. Although the sweat evaporated as soon as it came out, turning into blue steam, he still couldn't stand the feeling of sweating all over his body. More than half an hour later, after taking a comfortable hot bath and changing into clean clothes, he opened the portal and returned to the New York Temple. Strange's vampire experience mission is not over yet, and he also has the idea of finding a few vampires to practice his Rinnegan. What happened to your eyes? When he arrived at the cafeteria in the temple, Strange, who was eating a burger, looked up at him and asked in confusion. Nothing much, just a change of image. Rog's left eye is now a 3-tomo Sharingan, while his right eye is a Rinnegan. His blood-red left eye and light purple right eye gave off an asymmetrical sense of beauty. Kuroda didn't explain the Rinnegan to Strange. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and sat opposite Strange. After taking a sip of the black coffee, he continued, "If I'm not mistaken, the vampires outside are now looking for information about you. So, do you plan to continue looking for low-level vampires to train your combat skills, or do you plan to challenge a higher level of difficulty?" The two of them had killed a total of 13 vampires last night. Although there were no witnesses at the scene of the battle, with the vampires' abilities, they should be able to quickly determine that it was them who had done it. Perhaps the information about the two of them had already been placed on the table of the vampire prince in New York City while they were chatting. "I'm fine with anything. It's up to you." Strange swallowed the hamburger in his mouth and said casually, "Then challenge a higher level of difficulty. There's no need to waste too much time on those low-level vampires. You can deal with the vampires below the count level. I'll deal with the ones above the count level." Before Cain appeared, a vampire count was basically the strongest vampire in a city. Even if the vampires in an international metropolis like New York were stronger, they would at most have the strength of a marquis. But it was different now. After Cain appeared, the strength of the vampires had increased significantly. If there were no surprises, the strongest vampire in New York should be a duke. No problem. Strange didn't have any objections to Rog's arrangement. Last night, he had already fought with a vampire with the strength of a viscount. Although he didn't win, he had no problem protecting himself. If you have time today, learn a few more spells. If you only know 5 spells, you can only bully vampires below the count level. The future Doctor Strange was proficient in various schools of magic and could be considered one of the top existences in the field of magic. But the current Strange was still very far away from that realm. It was only at this time that Rog, a part-time mage, could act as Strange's magic teacher. But Strange ate the last bit of hamburger in his hand and answered silently. After communicating with Strange about tonight's plan, Rog went to the study in the temple and continued to browse through the magic books in the temple. Knowledge is power. This sentence was not only true in the field of science, but also in the field of magic. Time flew by. After treating the guardian king of the temple, who didn't have good economic conditions, to a luxurious lunch and dinner, Rog left the temple with Strange and began the second day of hunting. Shinra Tensei. Rog raised his right hand and sent the vampire count who tried to pounce on him flying. Just when the vampire count realized the huge difference in strength between him and Rog and tried to cast magic to escape, Rog raised his right hand again and aimed his palm at him. 10,000 celestial beacon. Magic undulations emerged from the vampire count's body and he flew uncontrollably toward Rog. Who is this guy? This unlucky vampire count didn't recognize Rog. The reason was simple. Rog deliberately cast a transformation spell to change his appearance so that these guys wouldn't frantically run away when they saw him. After using the tyrannical gravitational force of 10,000 celestial beacon to pull the vampire count in front of him, hellfire from the depths of hell appeared on Rog's right hand. Ah! The moment his right hand wrapped in hellfire grabbed the vampire count, this vampire count who had a certain reputation among the vampires let out a miserable scream. This ear-piercing scream only lasted for a short 1 or 2 seconds before abruptly stopping. The vampire count whose neck had been grabbed by Logue quickly turned into a cloud of scattered ashes under the scorching hellfire. A vampire count was nothing more than this. After shaking his right hand that wasn't stained with any ash, Logue turned to look in Strange's direction. Compared to last night, Strange had improved significantly today. With the help of the hovering cloak, he faced off against 5 vampire viscounts alone. Moreover, he fought back and forth without yielding an inch. Chapter 614. Last night, he could only fight 1 against 3, but today he could fight 1 against 5. Strange's progress was not small. Of course, this was also related to the fact that he had learned a few new spells today. Because of the time constraints, Strange did not learn too complicated and advanced magic. Instead, he learned a few Zero Circle and First Circle spells that could be mastered by practicing casually. For example, magic tricks, blind, mage's hand, and so on. Although these spells were not advanced, if used well, they could still have an effect on the battle. After taking care of the vampire earl who was in charge of leading the team, Rog sat casually on the wall beside the street, watching Strange's battle. It had to be said that Strange's performance tonight was very good, and it could be said that he had been reborn, as expected of the successor appointed by the Ancient One. With this adaptability and comprehension ability, even if he did not study magic and change to science, he could still become a representative of a certain field. Although Logue didn't intervene in Strange's battle, the scene of him casually killing the vampire count left a severe psychological shadow in the hearts of the vampires present. Especially the last scream of the vampire earl, it made the vampires' hair stand on end, and they unconsciously swallowed their saliva. They did not come to look for Rog tonight. The reason why they met was purely because the place where they appeared was too close to the New York sanctum. Before they left the sanctum, Rog sensed their existence. After discovering that there was an earl among them, he decisively brought Strange over. It would be a waste not to eat the appetizer that was delivered to his door. Moreover, the strength of these vampires was just right for Strange, who had already experienced a battle. Under Rog's observation, Strange was getting more and more used to the fight. Magic missiles, paralysis, Mage's Hand, and other spells were thrown out one after another as if they did not cost magic power. For some reason, after seeing Strange's fighting style that already had some prototype of a magic cannon, he could not help but think of Loki, who was far away in Asgard. Speaking of which, he had not seen Loki for a long time. He did not know if the god of trickery, who had regained his freedom, had been doing well recently. Since he thought of Loki, he naturally thought of Thor and Hela. After thinking for a few seconds, he made a decision. Once Strange's mission was over, he would make a trip to Asgard and Warnerheim. The fruit of the Tree of God will ripen in 3 months, and he has already opened one of his Rinnegan. Therefore, in the next 3 months, he didn't have anything particularly urgent to deal with. In that case, let's go to Asgard and Warnerheim, and bring Hinata along for a pleasant 2-person trip. Strange would never have thought that while he was fighting these vampires to the death, Logue was actually thinking about traveling to another planet. As time passed, Strange's cooperation with the hovering cloak became increasingly tacit. After casting a combination of teleportation gate, light of mana, blind, and magic missiles, Strange got rid of 3 vampires in one go and grasped the hope of victory in his hands. The count who led the team died, and 3 of his companions also died. Although the remaining 2 vampires tried their best to escape from the mirror dimension, their lives still ended in the mirror dimension that was parallel to the real world. When Strange called back the hovering cloak and adjusted his heartbeat by taking a deep breath, Rog, who was sitting on the wall, suddenly said, "Although your magic power level is very good, you should try to save some magic power in the future. You won't like the feeling of kidney failure when your magic power is exhausted." Overall, Strange's performance in this battle was not bad. The only problem is that he wasted a lot of unnecessary magic power. Spell battery is indeed a tactic that requires continuous high-frequency casting of spells, but this doesn't mean that one doesn't need to consider the consumption of magic power when using this tactic. There is no need to throw 5 spells at an enemy that can be killed with 3 spells. In terms of choosing spells, you can do a little better, and the timing of the release can be a little better. After giving some combat advice to Strange, Rog took the lead to cast the teleportation gate and left the mirror dimension, and began to choose the second batch of targets for tonight for Strange. There is no shortage of vampires in New York now. If Strange is interested, Rog can even fill his 24 hours a day. But in this way, it is not to train his junior, but to push him to his death. When it was 5 o'clock in the morning, Rog and Strange, who had been busy outside all night, returned to the New York sanctum. Unlike last night, Strange returned to the sanctum lying down this time. He did not die, nor was he injured. The reason why he returned to the New York sanctum lying on the hovering cloak was purely because he exhausted all his magic power and experienced the feeling of kidney failure that Rog mentioned before. More than 50 vampires had died in their hands that night. Among them, 14 were counts and above, and there were even 2 blood clan marquises. Of course, these counts and marquises were all killed by Rog, and Strange dealt with vampires below the count rank. After sending Strange, who couldn't even stand up, back to the sanctum, Rog informed the king and then left the sanctum alone. He was going to see an old friend in the vampire clan. After casting the teleportation gate magic to Liberty Island where the Statue of Liberty was located, Rog saw Grand Duke William standing on the Torch of Liberty. "You're here." When Rog cast the teleportation spell and arrived on the torch, Grand Duke William, who was dressed like a British aristocrat, said without looking back, "Didn't you ask me to come over? Why, are you starting to feel heartache for the death of your people?" Rog ignored Grand Duke William, who was standing and looking at the city. He sat down directly on the torch and looked at the calm sea shrouded in the night. "Why did you attack them? We didn't attack Konoha, and we even took the initiative to avoid the areas where Konoha's various branches are located." Grand Duke William turned his head and glanced at Rog, then said without any emotion, "My junior needs some experience recently, and it just so happens that you guys are the most active during this time, so I came to find you guys." After speaking, Rog took out the black business card engraved with a communication magic array from his pocket and threw it to Grand Duke William. "You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.